Rain hammered against cracked glass, while Ava Mercer collapsed to her knees in front of Seattle's most dangerous man. Blood mixed with spilled coffee on the diner floor. Her injured ankle screamed in agony. Customers stared. The humiliation burned hotter than pain itself. Then Lucien Moretti, the underworld kingpin who made politicians disappear and judges weep, crossed the room in 3 silent steps and knelt beside her like she was worth saving. In that moment, everything Ava thought she knew about survival shattered, because the monster everyone feared just looked at her like she mattered, and that terrified her more than anything else ever could. If you want to see how far desperation can push a single mother into the arms of Seattle's most ruthless crime lord, stay with me until the very end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The neon sign outside Marino's diner buzzed and flickered against the Seattle rain like a dying heartbeat. Inside, the air smelled like burnt coffee, cheap disinfectant, and the particular kind of exhaustion that clung to places where hope went to die slowly over lukewarm eggs and stale toast. Ava Mercer moved through the narrow space between tables with the mechanical precision of someone who had stopped thinking about movement years ago. Step, turn, smile, refill, repeat. Her body operated on autopilot while her mind calculated numbers that never added up no matter how many times she ran them. Rent, $800, due in 4 days. Ellie's medicine, $240, needed yesterday. Groceries, whatever was left after everything else, which lately meant nothing. The ankle brace hidden beneath her jeans dug into swollen flesh with every step. She'd twisted it badly 3 days ago, slipping on the diner's perpetually greasy floor, but calling in sick wasn't an option when you were already 2 missed shifts away from unemployment. Pain was just another bill she couldn't afford to pay attention to. "Coffee's cold," a man in a stained trucker cap grunted without looking up from his phone. Ava grabbed the pot from the warmer and refilled his cup. "Anything else?" He waved her off like she was a fly buzzing too close to his head. She turned away before the anger could show on her face. That was the trick. Swallow everything, smile through it, and never let them see you're drowning. People didn't tip waitresses who looked desperate. They tipped the ones who seemed like they were doing just fine. Like serving burnt hash browns at 2 in the morning was some kind of life choice, rather than the only thing standing between you and complete financial collapse. "Ava, table 6 needs their check," Marcus called from behind the counter. Her manager was a decent enough guy trapped in the same cycle of barely making it. That defined everyone who worked at Marino's. He'd stopped asking about her ankle after the first day. Questions implied concern, and concern implied the kind of workplace protections that diners operating on razor-thin margins couldn't afford to offer. She printed the check and limped toward table 6, each step sending fresh lightning up her leg. The couple sitting there didn't notice her approach. They were too busy arguing in the specific whisper shout that people used when they wanted to fight without admitting they were fighting. "Here's your check," Ava said, setting it down between them like a referee dropping a flag. The woman looked up with eyes that had cried recently. "Thanks." Ava walked away before she could see herself reflected in that woman's face. Different problems, maybe, but the same exhausted desperation underneath. Seattle was full of women like them, working 3 jobs, raising kids alone, one emergency away from losing everything. The city chewed through people and spit out the bones. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She pulled it out during a brief lull and felt her stomach drop. Landlord. Final notice. Pay by Friday or vacate premises. Friday was in 4 days. She had $312 in her checking account. The math was simple and devastating. "You good?" Marcus asked, wiping down the counter with a rag that had seen better decades. "Yeah." She shoved the phone back in her pocket. "All good." He didn't believe her, but he didn't push it either. That was another unspoken rule of their world. You didn't ask questions you knew had answers that would break your heart. The door chimed. Ava glanced up out of habit and immediately felt the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees. 3 men entered the diner, moving with the kind of synchronized silence that made the air itself hold its breath. They wore expensive suits that looked wrong in the fluorescent lighting of Marino's, like wolves dressed in sheep's clothing who'd forgotten to disguise the teeth. But it was the man in the center who made Ava's survival instinct scream. He was tall, dark-haired, and moved with the controlled grace of someone who'd spent a lifetime learning how to hurt people efficiently. Everything about him was sharp. The cut of his suit, the angle of his jaw, the way his dark eyes swept the room, cataloging exits and threats in the span of a heartbeat. He looked like he'd been carved from expensive marble and taught to bleed ice water. The diner went quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of people lost in their own thoughts, but the terrified silence of prey animals sensing a predator nearby. Marcus dropped the rag he'd been holding. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. "Who is that?" Ava asked. "Lucien Moretti." Marcus's voice cracked on the name. "Get someone else to take that table. Anyone else." But before Ava could move, Lucien Moretti's eyes found hers across the room. The world narrowed to that single point of contact. His gaze holding hers with the weight of a promise or a threat, she couldn't tell which. Something flickered across his expression too fast to name before his face went blank again, a mask sliding back into place. One of his men gestured toward the corner booth, the one farthest from the windows with a clear view of the entrance. They moved as a unit, the two bodyguards flanking Moretti like satellites orbiting a planet made of violence and tailored wool. "I'll take it," Ava heard herself say. Marcus grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? Do you know who that is? A customer who needs coffee?" "That's Lucien Moretti. The Lucien Moretti." Marcus looked like he wanted to shake her. "The man owns half the underground in this city. Judges, cops, politicians, everyone answers to him. Last year, a city councilman tried to testify against one of his operations and disappeared 3 days before the trial." "So he probably tips well," Ava said, pulling her arm free. "I need the money, Marcus." That shut him up. Everyone at Marino's needed the money. That was why they were all here instead of anywhere better. She grabbed a pot of fresh coffee and crossed the diner before her nerve could fail. Up close, the three men looked even more dangerous. The bodyguards had the flat eyes of people who'd stopped flinching at violence a long time ago. They watched her approach the way security cameras watched convenience stores, constant surveillance without emotion. But Lucien Moretti didn't look at her like she was a threat. He looked at her like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "Coffee?" Ava asked, proud that her voice came out steady. "Please." His voice was low, controlled, and carried the faint trace of an accent that money and expensive schools had almost completely erased. Almost. She poured 3 cups, acutely aware that her hands were shaking slightly. The coffee trembled in the cups like it knew it was being served to someone important. "Do you need a minute with the menu, or—" "We're not here to eat," one of the bodyguards interrupted. He had a scar running from his temple to his jaw and eyes that had witnessed things Ava didn't want to imagine. "Then why—" "Business meeting," Lucien said simply, his eyes never leaving Ava's face. "We needed somewhere discreet, neutral ground." Ava nodded like that made sense, even though every instinct she had was screaming at her to walk away. "Let me know if you need anything." She turned to leave, and that's when her ankle decided it had endured enough. The joint gave out mid-step with a crack of pain so intense her vision went white at the edges. She pitched forward, coffee pot flying from her hands, and slammed into the floor with enough force to knock the air from her lungs. Glass exploded across the tiles. Coffee spread like a dark mirror reflecting the fluorescent lights above. And Ava lay there in the wreckage, humiliation burning hotter than the pain in her ankle, while every person in the diner stared at her like she was a car crash they couldn't look away from. The couple from table 6 winced in sympathy. The trucker kept scrolling through his phone. Marcus started toward her with a mop and a look of deep exhaustion. Then Lucien Moretti stood up. The movement was so sudden and decisive that both bodyguards reached for weapons that Ava desperately hoped they weren't actually carrying in a public diner. Moretti crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and knelt beside her on the coffee-soaked floor like ruining an $8,000 suit was a perfectly reasonable thing to do. "Don't move," he said quietly. "I'm fine." Ava tried to push herself up and immediately regretted it when pain shot through her ankle like someone was driving nails through the bone. You need to stop pretending you're fine." Moretti's hand was on her shoulder, gentle but firm, keeping her from making things worse. "Your ankle's badly damaged. How long have you been working on it?" 3 days. "Christ!" Something that might have been anger or might have been concern flickered across his face. "Where's your manager?" Marcus appeared at the edge of Ava's vision, mop in hand, looking like he'd rather be literally anywhere else. Sir, She needs medical attention. Moretti's voice hadn't gotten louder, but it had gotten colder. Now. We don't have, Marcus started. Then I'll provide it. Moretti turned his attention back to Ava. Can you stand? I don't need. He was already sliding one arm behind her shoulders and the other beneath her knees. I'm going to pick you up. Don't fight me. You can't just. I can do whatever I want. He lifted her off the floor with the ease of someone who spent time in gyms that cost more than Ava made in a year. That's what happens when you own the city. Ava wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to put her down, wanted to maintain some shred of dignity in front of the entire diner. But the pain in her ankle was screaming loud enough to drown out her pride, and something about the way Moretti held her, carefully, like she was fragile but not weak, made the protest die in her throat. Marco, Moretti said to the scarred bodyguard, bring the car around. Boss, we have the meeting. Reschedule it. Moretti was already moving toward the door, carrying Ava like she weighed nothing. Tell them something came up. The second bodyguard held the door open, and then they were outside in the rain. It hammered down from a sky the color of old bruises, soaking through Ava's uniform in seconds, and turning Moretti's perfect black suit into something that clung to his shoulders like wet silk. A black SUV pulled up to the curb with tinted windows so dark they looked like portals into somewhere that didn't exist on any map. Marco opened the back door, and Moretti slid inside with Ava still in his arms, settling her onto leather seats that probably cost more than her entire apartment building. Wait, Ava said as the door closed. I can't just leave. My shift is over. Moretti reached for something mounted in the door panel, a first aid kit that looked like it belonged in an operating room rather than a car. Your manager will understand. You don't know, Marcus. I know men who work jobs they hate because they have no other choice. Moretti pulled out scissors and reached for her pant leg. I started as one of them. Before Ava could process that statement, he was cutting away the denim around her ankle brace with the steady hands of someone who'd performed field medicine before. The brace came off next, revealing purple and black bruising that had spread up her calf like storm clouds. Moretti went very still. How have you been walking on this? Carefully. The word came out more bitter than Ava intended. This isn't careful, this is reckless. He pulled out an instant ice pack, cracked it to activate the chemicals, and pressed it against her ankle with surprising gentleness. You could have permanent damage, nerve damage. You understand that? I understand I have a 3-year-old daughter who needs to eat. The words hung in the air between them like a confession Ava hadn't meant to make. Moretti's eyes met hers, and for just a moment she saw something flicker behind that controlled exterior. Recognition, maybe, or understanding born from pain he didn't talk about. What's your daughter's name? He asked quietly. Ellie. And her father? Gone. Ava looked away, out the tinted window where rain turned Seattle into a watercolor painting of itself. He left before she was born, took my savings with him. Moretti was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had gone dangerously soft. Name. What? The man who stole from you and abandoned his child. Give me his name. Ava's pulse kicked up because something about the way Moretti asked made it sound less like curiosity and more like he was taking inventory of people who needed to have conversations with very large men in very small rooms. It doesn't matter anymore, she said. It matters to me. The SUV started moving, gliding through Seattle streets with the smooth silence of expensive engineering. Ava realized she had no idea where they were going and that she should probably be terrified, but the ice pack against her ankle and the exhaustion in her bones made it hard to summon the appropriate level of fear. Where are you taking me? She asked. Somewhere you can get proper medical attention. I can't afford. You're not paying. I'm not your responsibility. No. Moretti adjusted the ice pack slightly, his touch clinical but not cold. But you collapsed in front of me because you've been destroying your body to keep your daughter fed. That makes it my business. Why? The question clearly caught him off guard. His hand paused for just a fraction of a second before continuing its careful work. Because I remember what it's like to watch people I cared about suffer while no one with the power to help gave a damn. I swore if I ever had that power, I'd be different. And do you have that power? Yes. To do what? His eyes met hers, dark and unfathomable. Whatever I want. The SUV climbed higher into the hills overlooking Seattle, leaving behind the neon-stained streets where Ava had spent years drowning. The buildings got taller, the cars got more expensive, and the rain somehow looked different when it fell on neighborhoods where people had the money to stay dry. They pulled up in front of a tower of glass and steel that punched into the sky like a middle finger to gravity itself. Marco opened the door, and Moretti carefully scooped Ava back into his arms despite her protests. I can walk, she insisted. Not on that ankle, you can't. He carried her through a lobby that looked like it had been designed by architects who'd never heard the word budget, past security guards who nodded at Moretti like he was royalty, and into a private elevator with mahogany panels and buttons that went higher than Ava thought buildings in Seattle were allowed to go. The elevator rose with stomach-dropping speed until it opened directly into a penthouse that redefined Ava's understanding of the word apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Seattle sprawled below, like a kingdom made of lights and rain. The interior was all clean lines, dark wood, and furniture that looked like it had been hand-carved by artists who charged by the minute. Everything about the space screamed money in the quiet, confident way that truly wealthy people preferred. No flash, no gold-plated nonsense, just the kind of understated luxury that cost more than flash ever could. Mr. Moretti. An older man in an expensive suit appeared from a side hallway, a medical bag in one hand. Marco said you needed immediate assistance. Dr. Chen. Moretti carried Ava to a leather couch that probably cost more than her car had before it died. Her ankle. 3 days working on a severe injury. I need you to tell me exactly how bad it is. Dr. Chen knelt beside the couch with the practiced efficiency of a man who'd treated injuries in less luxurious locations. He examined Ava's ankle with gentle hands, pressing here, rotating there, asking questions about pain levels and mobility, while Moretti stood nearby radiating the kind of tension that suggested he was restraining himself from doing something violent to whoever had let this go on for 3 days. The joint is severely inflamed, Dr. Chen said finally. The ligaments are damaged, possibly torn. If she continues to walk on it without proper treatment, she's looking at permanent mobility issues. Surgery might be required if the tearing is extensive. The words landed like punches. Surgery meant hospitals. Hospitals meant bills. Bills meant losing everything. Ava's vision blurred at the edges, and she realized distantly that she was having a panic attack in a stranger's penthouse while a doctor who probably charged $1,000 an hour explained how her life was about to get impossibly worse. Can you fix it? Moretti's voice cut through the rising static in Ava's head. With proper rest, physical therapy, and medication, yes. But she needs to stay completely off the ankle for at least 2 weeks, minimum. 2 weeks? Ava's voice came out strangled. I can't take 2 weeks off. I'll lose my job. I'll lose my apartment. You'll do what the doctor says. Moretti's tone left no room for argument. Dr. Chen, prescribe whatever she needs and send the bills to me. And I want a full treatment plan. Medication, therapy, specialists if necessary. Of course, Mr. Moretti. Dr. Chen pulled supplies from his bag. A proper medical brace, prescription-strength pain medication, anti-inflammatories. He worked with the calm of someone who'd learned not to ask questions about the injured people his employer brought home. When he finished, he handed Ava a small pharmacy's worth of pills and instructions. Stay off it completely. Ice 20 minutes every hour. Take the pain medication with food. I'll schedule follow-up appointments. I can't afford, Ava started. You're not paying, Moretti said again. I can't let you. You can't stop me. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city spread below like he owned every light that burned in the darkness. Dr. Chen, thank you. Marco will see you out. When the doctor left, the silence in the penthouse felt heavier than it should have. Ava sat on the couch surrounded by medication and mounting panic, while Lucien Moretti stood at the window like a king surveying his kingdom and trying to figure out what to do with the subject he'd just acquired. Why are you doing this? Ava asked finally. He didn't turn around. I told you, I remember what it's like. To be poor? To be desperate. Now he did turn, and the look on his face made Ava's breath catch. I was 16 when my father's business partners decided he was a liability. They beat him to death in our kitchen while my mother and I listened from the next room. Afterward, they told us we could work for them or we could die with him. So we worked. I spent the next 5 years doing things I will never forgive myself for because the alternative was watching my mother starve. The confession hung in the air like smoke. What happened to your mother? Ava asked softly. Cancer, 3 years ago. His expression didn't change, but his voice got quieter. By the time I had the money and resources to get her the best treatment, it was too late. She died in a hospital room that cost $10,000 a night, and all I could think was how she'd spent most of her life afraid we couldn't afford the doctor for a common cold. Ava looked at this man, this dangerous, powerful, feared man, and saw the same exhausted desperation she recognized in her own reflection every morning. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be sorry. Be smart. He moved closer, and Ava could smell expensive cologne mixed with rain and something darker underneath. You're killing yourself for a job that will replace you within a week if you die. Your daughter will grow up watching her mother destroy herself and learning that suffering is just what women do to survive. Is that the lesson you want to teach her? The words cut deeper than Ava expected because they were true. What else am I supposed to do? The question came out raw. I have no money, no family, no degree. I'm a single mother with a high school education and a damaged ankle. Who's going to hire me? Who's going to pay me enough to keep Ellie fed and safe? I will. The offer landed between them like a bomb disguised as kindness. What? Moretti sat down in the chair across from her, close enough that Ava could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I need someone to accompany me to social events, dinners, galas, business functions, the kind of places where showing up alone makes people ask questions I don't want to answer. You would be my companion. Nothing more. Ava's laugh came out sharp and bitter. You want to pay me to be your girlfriend? I want to pay you to make me look human. His expression didn't change. I'm aware of what people say about me. Monster, killer, criminal, all accurate, incidentally. But there are times when I need to be seen as something other than a threat. A woman and a child would help with that. And in exchange, you and your daughter would have security, healthcare, education, and a future that doesn't involve working yourself to death in a diner. That's insane. That's business. I don't even know you. You know I caught you when you fell. You know I brought you here instead of leaving you bleeding on the floor. You know I'm offering you a way out of the life that's killing you. He leaned forward slightly. What else do you need to know? Everything, Ava thought. But what she said was, why me? For the first time, Moretti smiled. It was a small thing, barely there, but it changed his entire face. Because when I looked at you across that diner, you looked back at me like I was just another customer, not a monster, not a king, just a man who wanted coffee. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Ava's mind raced. This was crazy. This was dangerous. This was a man who made city councilmen disappear and owned judges like other people owned stocks. Getting involved with him would be like stepping into a cage with a tiger and hoping it had already eaten. But the medication sitting beside her probably cost more than she made in a month. Dr. Chen's examination had been thorough and professional in a way that suggested he actually cared whether she healed properly. And Moretti had looked at her daughter's situation and immediately offered solutions instead of judgments. I need to think about it, she said. Of course. He stood smoothly. Marco will drive you home. Keep the medication. Follow Dr. Chen's instructions. And when you've made your decision, call this number. He handed her a business card with nothing on it except a phone number embossed in silver. If I say no? Ava asked. Then you say no. I'm not in the habit of forcing people into arrangements they don't want. His expression went serious. But understand what you're choosing. Your ankle will heal eventually, but without proper rest, you'll have pain and limited mobility for the rest of your life. You'll go back to Marino's until your body completely gives out or they fire you. You'll lose your apartment, your ability to provide for Ellie, and eventually, social services will start asking questions about whether you're capable of caring for her. That's not a threat. That's just reality. The words were brutal because they were true. Ava took the card with shaking hands. Marco appeared as if summoned, and Moretti carefully helped Ava to her feet, supporting her weight so she didn't have to put pressure on the damaged ankle. He walked her to the elevator, and Ava had the strange feeling that she was being escorted out of somewhere important and dangerous that she'd never be invited back to. "One question," she said as the elevator doors started to close. "Yes?" "My ex, the one who took my money, you asked his name." Moretti's expression went very still. "I did. If I gave it to you, what would you do?" He was quiet for a long moment, weighing his answer. When he spoke, his voice was soft and absolutely terrifying. "I would make him regret every decision that led him to steal from you." The elevator doors closed on his face, and Ava rode down through 50 floors of expensive real estate with her heart hammering against her ribs and a business card burning a hole in her pocket like evidence of a deal she hadn't agreed to yet, but somehow knew she'd eventually make. Because Lucien Moretti had looked at her like she mattered, and that was more dangerous than any threat he could have made. Marco drove her home in silence, pulling up in front of the apartment building that looked even more decrepit after 2 hours in the world of private doctors and penthouse views. Ava limped inside on her new medical brace, climbed 3 flights of stairs because the elevator was broken again, and let herself into the tiny apartment where her neighbor Mrs. Chen was watching Ellie. "Mommy!" Ellie launched herself at Ava with the boundless energy of a 3-year-old who'd spent the day eating crackers and watching cartoons. "You're home early." "Yeah, baby. Mama had a little accident at work." Ava scooped her daughter up with one arm, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo and graham crackers. "But I'm okay." Mrs. Chen hovered in the doorway, concern written across her weathered face. "You sure you're all right? Your ankle." "I'll be fine. Thank you for watching her." When Mrs. Chen left and Ellie was distracted by her toys, Ava sank onto their threadbare couch and looked around the apartment with new eyes. The water stain on the ceiling had gotten bigger. The heater rattled and wheezed but didn't actually produce heat. The refrigerator hummed loud enough to wake the dead, but barely kept food cold. This was what she was choosing if she said no to Moretti's offer. This tiny cage of poverty and desperation where she'd spend the rest of her life watching her daughter grow up, afraid of hunger and eviction and all the small terrors that came with being poor in America. But if she said yes... Ava pulled out the business card and stared at the phone number like it was a lottery ticket or a death warrant. If she said yes, she'd be stepping into a world she didn't understand, making a deal with a man who terrified her, and gambling that he'd keep his word instead of devouring her whole. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. Don't know how long I can hold your position. Boss is asking questions." The message felt like a door slamming shut. Ava looked at Ellie playing on the floor, completely unaware that her mother was balancing on a knife's edge between survival and collapse. Then she looked at the medication Moretti had given her. Expensive, effective, prescribed by a real doctor who'd actually examined her instead of just telling her to take some ibuprofen and walk it off. And Ava made her decision. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the card. It rang twice before Moretti's voice answered. "Yes?" "It's Ava." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "I need to know something before I agree. Ask, if I do this, if I take this arrangement, are you going to hurt my daughter?" The silence that followed was so complete, Ava could hear her own heartbeat. When Moretti finally spoke, his voice was colder than she'd ever heard it. "I have done terrible things to terrible people. I have ended lives and destroyed families and built an empire on violence and fear, but I do not harm children, ever. That line exists for a reason, and I have never crossed it." "Okay, that's not enough for you?" He sounded almost offended. "No, it is." Ava closed her eyes. "Because I believe you. I don't know why, but I do." "Then we have an agreement?" "We have an agreement." "Good. I'll send Marco tomorrow morning to help you move. Pack what you need. Everything else, we'll replace." "I haven't..." Ava started, but the line was already dead. She sat in the dim apartment holding her phone and feeling like she'd just signed something written in a language she didn't speak. Outside, Seattle rain hammered against the windows, washing the city clean of another day's accumulated grime. Ellie looked up from her toys with her mother's eyes and her absent father's smile. "Mama, are you crying?" "No, baby." Ava wiped her face quickly. "Mama's just tired." But that wasn't quite true. Ava wasn't crying because she was sad. She was crying because for the first time in 3 years, she felt something that might have been hope. And hope was the most dangerous feeling of all when you'd spent so long learning to live without it. Marco arrived at 7 in the morning driving a black SUV that looked like it cost more than Ava's entire block. He knocked twice, professional, efficient, and when Ava opened the door with Ellie clinging to her leg and exhaustion written across her face, he simply nodded like moving single mothers into crime lords' penthouses was just another Tuesday. "Mr. Moretti said to take whatever you need," Marco said, his scarred face betraying nothing. "Everything else gets replaced." Ava looked around the apartment that had been her prison and her shelter for 2 years. The sagging couch where she'd rocked Ellie through fevers and nightmares, the chipped dishes they'd eaten 1,000 meals off, the stuffed elephant Ellie had named Mr. Trunk, who was missing one ear and most of his stuffing. "Can I bring Mr. Trunk?" Ellie asked, hugging the worn toy against her chest. "Of course, baby." Ava's throat tightened. "Mr. Trunk comes with us." It took 20 minutes to pack their lives into 4 garbage bags and 2 cardboard boxes. Clothes that were more patches than fabric. Ellie's toys. The photo album with pictures of Ava's parents who'd died in a car accident when she was 19. A shoebox full of bills and eviction notices that Ava threw in the trash because where she was going, they didn't matter anymore. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway as they were loading the last box. "You're leaving?" "Yeah." Ava couldn't quite meet her neighbor's eyes. "Got a new opportunity." "With that man yesterday? The one in the expensive suit?" "It's complicated." Mrs. Chen studied her for a long moment, and Ava saw the judgment forming. Saw her neighbor calculating what kind of woman took her daughter and moved in with a strange man within 24 hours of meeting him. "I hope you know what you're doing," Mrs. Chen said finally. "Me too." The drive across Seattle felt like crossing between worlds. They left behind the crumbling buildings and broken streetlights of Ava's neighborhood and climbed into the hills where money insulated people from the city's rougher edges. Ellie pressed her face against the window, watching Seattle transform from gray concrete to gleaming glass. "Mama, where are we going?" "Somewhere new?" Ava's hands twisted in her lap. "Somewhere safe." "Is it pretty?" "Yeah, baby, it's pretty." The tower looked even more imposing in daylight. A spear of steel and glass punching into low clouds that hung over the city like a threat. Marco guided them through the lobby, where security guards nodded with the kind of respect reserved for people who could end careers with a phone call. And then they were rising through 50 floors in the private elevator while Ava's stomach dropped and her pulse hammered against her ribs. The doors opened directly into Moretti's penthouse. Ava had expected him to be there waiting, but the space was empty except for the sound of rain against floor-to-ceiling windows, and the faint hum of expensive appliances running in rooms she hadn't seen yet. The view was even more breathtaking in daylight. Seattle spread below like a kingdom made of rain and ambition. "Mr. Moretti is handling business downtown," Marco said, reading Ava's unasked question. "He said to show you the rooms." He led them down a hallway lined with abstract art that probably cost more than Ava's entire life. Past a kitchen with marble countertops and appliances that looked like they'd been designed by people who thought cooking should involve touchscreens and apps. Through a living area with furniture so pristine Ava was afraid to let Ellie near it. Then Marco opened a door, and Ava's breath caught. The room was painted soft blue with clouds drifting across the ceiling like something from a dream. Shelves lined one wall filled with books and toys still in their packaging. Dinosaurs and building blocks, and stuffed animals with all their ears intact. A bed shaped like a race car sat in the corner beneath a mobile of glowing stars. Everything was clean and new and perfect. "This is for Ellie," Marco said. "Mr. Moretti had it prepared yesterday." Ellie's eyes went wide. She looked up at Ava for permission, and when Ava nodded, she ran into the room and immediately grabbed a T-Rex from the shelf, hugging it like she'd found treasure. "Mama, look! It's huge!" Ava couldn't speak, couldn't process that Lucien Moretti, a man who made people disappear and built empires on violence, had spent time picking out dinosaurs and painting clouds on a ceiling for a child he'd never met. "Your room's next door," Marco said, moving to the adjacent door. This room was different, adult. The walls were a soft gray, the furniture dark wood and clean lines. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in white linens that looked like they cost more than Ava's monthly rent used to. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the same view of Seattle that had taken her breath away in the main living area. But what caught Ava's attention was the closet. It was already full. She crossed the room slowly and opened the doors to find racks of clothes, dresses and slacks and blouses in her size, still bearing tags from designers she'd only seen in magazines. Shoes lined the bottom in neat rows, jewelry boxes sat on shelves, everything a woman would need to attend the kind of events where Moretti needed someone to make him look human. "How did he know my size?" Ava asked quietly. Marco's expression didn't change. "Mr. Moretti is very good at paying attention to details." "That's not attention to detail, that's thorough." Marco checked his watch. "There's food in the kitchen. Mr. Moretti will be back tonight. If you need anything, use the house phone and dial 0. Then he was gone, and Ava was alone in a penthouse that cost more per month than she'd made in her entire life, with a daughter playing with expensive dinosaurs in the next room and a closet full of clothes that felt like a uniform for a job she still didn't fully understand. She sank onto the bed and felt the mattress conform to her body, with the kind of support that came from materials engineered by scientists who understood spines. Her ankle throbbed dully beneath the medical brace, a constant reminder of how she'd ended up here. "Mama!" Ellie appeared in the doorway, the T-Rex clutched in one hand and Mr. Trunk in the other. "Can I keep both?" "Yeah, baby, you can keep both." Ellie ran back to her room, and Ava heard her talking to the dinosaurs in the serious voice she used when explaining important things to her toys. The sound should have been comforting. Instead, it made Ava's chest tighten with something that felt like panic wearing a different mask. What had she done? She'd moved her daughter into a stranger's home based on 24 hours of conversation and a business card with nothing but a phone number. She'd accepted clothes and medical care and a room full of toys from a man who terrified entire city blocks. She'd made a deal without reading the fine print because the alternative was watching Ellie grow up hungry. Her phone buzzed. "Marcus. Boss says if you're not back by Friday, position's filled. Sorry." The message landed like a door slamming shut behind her. No going back now. Forward was the only direction left, and forward meant figuring out how to survive in a world she didn't understand. Ava spent the day exploring the penthouse with Ellie, discovering rooms that seemed designed to showcase wealth in its quietest, most dangerous form. A library with first editions behind glass. A home gym with equipment that looked like it belonged in professional training facilities. A wine cellar with bottles that probably cost more than cars. And everywhere, the sense that violence lived beneath the expensive surfaces like a predator sleeping under silk sheets. The security system had cameras in every hallway. The locks on the doors were the kind used in banks. The windows were bulletproof. Ava knocked on one and heard the dead thunk of reinforced glass designed to stop things that regular windows couldn't. This wasn't just a home. It was a fortress disguised as luxury. Ellie didn't notice. She was too busy running between rooms, exploring her new kingdom with the fearless enthusiasm of a 3-year-old who thought dinosaurs and race car beds meant everything was right with the world. By the time evening fell and Seattle's lights began flickering on below like candles in a cemetery, Ava was exhausted from monitoring Ellie's exploration while trying not to touch anything that looked expensive enough to require insurance. The elevator chimed. Ava's pulse kicked up as footsteps crossed the hardwood floors. Then Lucien Moretti appeared in the doorway of the living room, still dressed in the black suit he'd worn yesterday, but with his tie loosened and exhaustion written across his face in ways that money couldn't hide. He saw Ava standing by the windows and went very still. "You came." "I said I would. People say a lot of things." He moved to the bar in the corner and poured himself 2 fingers of something amber that probably cost more than Ava used to make in a week. "It's the following through that matters. Where's Ellie?" "Playing in her room. The dinosaurs are a hit." Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "Good." They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the arrangement settling between them like smoke. Ava didn't know what to say to this man who'd bought her way out of poverty and into a cage made of bulletproof glass and designer clothes. "You picked out the toys yourself," she said finally. "Didn't you?" "How did you know?" "Because they're specific, not generic kid stuff. Someone who was thinking about what a 3-year-old girl would actually want to play with." Moretti took a drink, his expression unreadable. "My mother used to take me to toy stores when I was young. We couldn't afford anything, but she'd let me look. I'd spend hours planning which dinosaurs I'd buy if we ever had money. It seemed appropriate." The confession hung in the air between them, more intimate than Ava expected. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For the room, for everything." "Don't thank me yet." He set down his glass. "We should discuss the arrangement in detail, what I expect, what you should expect from me." "Okay." Moretti moved to the couch and gestured for Ava to sit. She did, acutely aware of the space between them and the way he held himself like someone who'd learned to be dangerous before he learned to be comfortable. "The social events start next week," he said. "Charity galas, business dinners, political fundraisers. You'll need to be comfortable in formal settings, making conversation, smiling at people who don't deserve it. I've been waitressing for years. Smiling at terrible people is basically my job description. This is different. These aren't drunk truckers demanding coffee. These are politicians who steal millions, businessmen who've destroyed families, criminals wearing expensive suits and pretending they're legitimate." His eyes met hers. "And they'll be looking at you, trying to figure out who you are and what you mean to me. How you handle that matters." "What do you want me to say?" "Whatever feels natural. I don't want you to lie. I just want you to exist beside me like a normal human being so they see me as something other than a threat. And when they ask how we met, tell them the truth. You worked at a diner. I saw you. We started talking." His expression was carefully neutral. "Leave out the part where you fell and I carried you out. That story makes me sound too much like a rescuer, and rescuers get ideas about control." Ava's stomach twisted because she hadn't thought about how their origin story sounded from outside perspectives. Woman meets powerful man. Woman needs help. Powerful man provides it. Tale as old as patriarchy itself. "I'm not here because I need rescuing," she said, keeping her voice steady. "I'm here because we made a business arrangement." "Good. Remember that when people try to make you doubt it." "Do you think they will?" "I know they will. Because that's what people do when they see something that doesn't fit their expectations. They twist it until it matches what they think they understand." He leaned back, and for the first time since entering, he looked tired in a way that went deeper than a long day. "You should know something before this goes any further. People will come to you, quietly, offering money, protection, information, asking you to spy on me, report my movements, betray me." Ava's pulse kicked up. "And if they do? Tell me immediately, because I need to know who's making those approaches so I can handle them before they become problems." His eyes went cold. "And understand that if you do take one of those offers, if you do betray me, there will be consequences. Not for you. I don't hurt women. But I will remove everything I've provided. The apartment, the security, the medical care. All of it disappears, and you go back to exactly where you started." The threat was delivered without heat, which somehow made it more terrifying. "I'm not going to betray you," Ava said. "People say that too, usually right before they do exactly that. I'm not other people." "No." He studied her for a long moment. "You're not. That's why I chose you." The elevator chimed again. Moretti stood smoothly, and Ava saw his entire demeanor shift, the exhaustion vanishing behind a mask of controlled authority. Two men entered the penthouse, both wearing suits that looked expensive but not ostentatious. One was older, gray-haired, with eyes that had seen violence and accepted it as currency. The other was younger, maybe 30, with the kind of pretty boy features that probably made him useful in situations where looking harmless was an asset. "Vincent? Carlo." Moretti's voice had gone flat. "I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk." Vincent, the older one, glanced at Ava with the kind of assessment that made her skin crawl. "Privately. Anything you need to say can be said in front of Ava. She lives here now." The silence that followed was so sharp Ava could feel it cutting. Carlo, the younger one, laughed. "You're joking." "Do I look like I'm joking?" "Boss, we've got the Castellano situation escalating, and you're playing house with—" Carlo caught himself, but not before Ava saw the contempt flash across his face. "With a civilian." "Ava, this is Vincent Russo, my second-in-command, and Carlo Marino, who handles our operations in Pioneer Square." Moretti's voice was perfectly level, but Ava heard the warning underneath. "Gentlemen, this is Ava Mercer. You'll treat her with respect or you'll find new employment. Are we clear?" Vincent's expression didn't change. Crystal. Carlo's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Good." Moretti gestured to his office. a room Ava hadn't explored yet. We'll talk in there. Ava, check on Ellie. This shouldn't take long. Ava stood and walked past the three men, feeling their eyes track her movement. She caught Vincent's gaze as she passed, calculating, measuring, trying to figure out what leverage she represented. Carlo just looked angry, like her presence was a personal insult. She went to Ellie's room and found her daughter crashed on the floor surrounded by dinosaurs, Mr. Trunk clutched in one hand and the new T-Rex in the other, fast asleep the way only children could be, dropping into unconsciousness the moment their bodies decided rest was necessary. Ava carefully picked her up and carried her to the race car bed, tucking her under blankets that were softer than anything Ava had ever owned. Ellie mumbled something about herbivores and rolled over, and Ava stood there for a moment just watching her daughter sleep in a room designed for safety. Then she heard voices raised in Moretti's office. She shouldn't listen. She should go to her own room and pretend she didn't care about the business discussions happening behind closed doors. Instead, she moved quietly down the hallway and stood just outside the office where the voices were clearer. Complete liability. That was Carlo. You bring a woman and her kid into your home and expect us to just accept it? What happens when Castellano finds out? When he learns you've got soft spots he can target? Ava and Ellie are not liabilities. Moretti's voice was cold enough to freeze. They're under my protection. That makes them untouchable. Protection doesn't mean shit if someone puts a bullet through. The sound of something hitting a desk cut Carlo off mid-sentence. Finish that sentence and I'll break every bone in your hand. Moretti's voice had dropped to a whisper that was somehow more terrifying than shouting. You don't question my decisions. You don't speculate about threats to people I've claimed. You do your job, and you keep your mouth shut about my personal life. Understood? Silence. Then Vincent spoke, his tone more measured. Lucien, he's not wrong about the optics. Your enemies will see this as weakness. A single mother and a child living in your home? It looks like you're trying to play family man. It makes people wonder if you're still capable of making the hard calls. Then let them wonder. Moretti's voice was flat. Let them think I've gone soft. Let them make their moves based on that assumption. And when I put them in the ground for it, everyone else will remember why they feared me in the first place. And the woman? Carlo again. What's her angle? How long before she figures out what you're worth and starts making demands? Ava's not interested in my money. Every woman's interested in money? Carlo's laugh was ugly, especially single mothers with nothing. Give her 6 months and she'll be threatening to go to the cops with whatever she's learned about our operations unless you pay her off. Ava's hands clenched into fists. She should walk away, should pretend she hadn't heard Carlo reduce her to a stereotype and a threat. But her feet stayed planted outside the door, waiting to hear how Moretti would respond. If you spent half as much time focusing on your territory as you do speculating about my personal life, Pioneer Square wouldn't be hemorrhaging revenue. Moretti's voice cut like a blade. The Castellano situation exists because you've been too busy running your mouth to notice them moving product through your streets. Fix that. Then maybe I'll give a damn about your opinions on who I allow into my home. Lucie, Vincent tried. We're done. The sound of footsteps approaching the door. Get out, both of you. And Carlo? Next time you want to insult someone under my protection, make sure she's not standing in the hallway listening. Ava's stomach dropped. The door opened and Moretti stood there, his expression unreadable. Behind him, Vincent and Carlo looked between their boss and Ava with varying degrees of shock and calculation. Ava. Moretti's voice was perfectly controlled. Would you like to come in? She should say no, should apologize for eavesdropping and retreat to her room like a woman who knew her place. Instead, she stepped forward into the office, feeling 3 pairs of eyes track her movement. The office was exactly what she expected. Dark wood, expensive leather, windows overlooking Seattle like Moretti was a king surveying his domain. Carlo stood near the desk, looking like he'd been slapped. Vincent leaned against the wall with the calm of someone who'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. I wasn't trying to spy, Ava said, meeting Moretti's eyes. I was checking on Ellie, and I heard raised voices. And you were concerned someone might be threatening me? There was something almost like amusement in his voice. I was concerned about what they were saying about me and my daughter. Fair enough. Moretti turned to Carlo. Repeat what you said, to her face this time. Carlo's jaw worked. Boss, I didn't mean... Repeat it. The younger man's face flushed. He looked at Ava, and she saw the moment he decided to double down rather than back down. I said every woman's interested in money, and single mothers with nothing usually have angles. Do you think I have an angle? Ava asked quietly. I think everyone has an angle. Some people just hide them better. You're right. Ava took a step closer, ignoring the way her ankle protested the movement. I do have an angle. I want my daughter to grow up safe. I want her to have food and medicine and a chance at a future that doesn't involve choosing between rent and meals. That's my angle. If you think that makes me dangerous to your boss, then you're dumber than you look. Carlo's expression went cold. Careful. Don't threaten her. Moretti's voice cracked like a whip. In fact, don't speak to her again unless she speaks to you first. Vincent, get him out of here before I do something we'll both regret. Vincent moved smoothly between Carlo and the rest of them, one hand on the younger man's shoulder, guiding him toward the door. Come on, let's give them space. This is a mistake, Carlo said, his eyes still on Ava. She's going to destroy everything you've built. Then I'll build it again. Moretti's expression was carved from ice. Now get out! The two men left, and Ava heard the elevator chime a moment later. Then it was just her and Moretti standing in the office, surrounded by the weight of what had just happened. I'm sorry, Ava said finally. I shouldn't have listened. You have nothing to apologize for. This is your home now. You have every right to know what's being said about you under my roof. He moved to the window, hands in his pockets. Carlo's not wrong about one thing, though. This arrangement makes you a target. People will see you as leverage against me, weakness they can exploit. And Vincent, is he right too? Does this make you look weak? Is this... Moretti was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I've spent 20 years building a reputation as someone who doesn't care about anything except power and control. That reputation kept me alive, kept me feared, but it also made me into exactly what they said I was, a monster who couldn't feel anything except ambition. He turned to face her, and Ava saw something raw in his expression. You and Ellie being here changes that narrative. It says I'm capable of caring about something other than my empire. And yes, that makes me look weaker to the men in my organization who've only ever known me as a threat, but it also makes me more dangerous. How? Because now I have something to protect. And men who think I've gone soft because I care about a woman and her child have never seen what I'm capable of when someone threatens the people I've claimed as mine. His eyes met hers. You should understand what that means, Ava, what you've become by accepting my protection. What have I become? Leverage, responsibility, a line in the sand that tells everyone in my world exactly how far they can push before I stop being reasonable. He stepped closer, and Ava could smell expensive cologne and something darker underneath. Gunpowder, maybe, or the particular scent of men who lived adjacent to violence. The moment you walked into my life, you became a message, and messages are dangerous things. Ava's pulse hammered in her throat. I didn't ask to be a message. No one ever does. But here we are. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face with surprising gentleness. If you want to leave, tell me now. I'll give you money. Set you up somewhere safe. Make sure you and Ellie are protected without requiring anything in return. But once we go to that first event together, once people see you beside me and draw their conclusions, leaving becomes complicated, dangerous. Because they'll think I know things. Because they'll think you matter to me. And people who matter to men like me become targets for men who want to hurt me. Ava thought about the apartment she'd left behind. The eviction notices, an empty refrigerator, and the constant calculation of which bills to pay versus which ones to ignore for another month. She thought about Ellie's dinosaur room and the closet full of clothes, and the way Moretti had knelt in a diner to help a stranger who'd fallen. I'm not leaving, she said. You're certain. I'm terrified, but I'm certain. Something shifted in Moretti's expression. Relief, maybe, or resignation. Then we move forward. The first event is Friday night, a charity gala at the Fairmont Olympic. 500 people dressed in formal wear pretending they care about underprivileged children while they drink champagne that costs more than most people make in a month. Sounds delightful. It's theater. Everyone's performing. The key is figuring out which role you're supposed to play. He moved back to his desk and pulled out a folder. These are the people who will be there. Politicians, businessmen, society wives. Study their faces, their names, what they do. You don't need to memorize everything, but you should know enough to avoid accidentally insulting someone who could make your life difficult. Ava took the folder and flipped through photos and dossiers that looked like something from a spy movie. You have files on all these people? I have files on everyone who matters in Seattle. Knowledge is the only currency that never devalues. She studied the faces. Men in suits, women in designer gowns, all of them smiling the particular smile of people who'd learned to weaponize charm. Names jumped out at her. Congressman Malcolm Pierce, Senator Diana Hartwell, CEO Richard Castellano. Ava's finger paused on that last one. Castellano. That's the name Carlo mentioned, the situation that's escalating. Moretti's expression went carefully blank. Yes. Is he dangerous? Everyone in that folder is dangerous, but Castellano is a specific kind of threat. Old money, political connections, and the delusion that his family's name still means something in this city. Moretti's jaw tightened. He's been moving into territories I control, pushing boundaries, testing whether I'll respond with violence or negotiation. What are you going to do? Whatever I have to. He took the folder from her hands and set it aside. But that's my problem. Your job is to smile, make conversation, and help me look like something other than a threat for 3 hours. Can you do that? Ava thought about all the years she'd spent smiling at customers who grabbed her ass and left quarters as tips. All the nights she'd pretended she wasn't exhausted, wasn't terrified, wasn't drowning. She'd been performing since she was 19 years old, and the inheritance her parents left her had vanished into Caleb Ryder's pocket along with her future. I can do that, she said. Good. Moretti glanced at his watch. It's late. You should rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss logistics, how to handle photographers, what to say if journalists ask questions, how to navigate conversations with people who will try to extract information from you. This is starting to sound more complicated than just showing up and looking pretty. Beauty is the least interesting thing about you. He said it so simply, like it was obvious truth rather than opinion. People will notice your face for about 30 seconds. What they'll remember is whether you made them feel comfortable or threatened, whether you were forgettable or someone worth paying attention to. Ava didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and turned toward the door. Ava? She looked back. Carlo was out of line, what he said about you having an angle. Moretti's expression was serious. But he wasn't entirely wrong about one thing. People will try to use you against me. They'll approach you with stories about my past, about things I've done, trying to make you afraid of me, trying to turn you into a spy or a liability. And when they do, remember that everyone in my world has blood on their hands. The only difference is I don't pretend I'm clean. His eyes held hers. I'm not a good man, Ava. I'm just honest about being a bad one. She left him standing in his office surrounded by files on dangerous people and went to her room where she lay in bed staring at the ceiling and wondering what kind of woman agreed to build a life in a fortress protected by a man who just admitted he was a monster. But then she thought about Ellie sleeping soundly next door, safe and warm and surrounded by toys she didn't have to share because there'd never be enough. And Ava realized the kind of woman who made that choice was the same kind who'd spent 3 years destroying her body to keep her daughter fed. She was a mother. And mothers didn't have the luxury of choosing safety over survival. The week passed in a blur of preparation. Moretti brought in a woman named Elena who taught Ava how to walk in heels without her injured ankle collapsing, how to hold champagne glasses like she drank from them regularly, how to deflect personal questions with grace instead of panic. Elena was professional, efficient, and completely uninterested in Ava's origin story, which was somehow more comforting than if she'd tried to be friendly. The trick is making them think you're bored by their questions, Elena said, watching Ava practice conversation deflections. Not defensive. Defensive makes people curious. Bored makes them move on to more interesting topics. Ellie spent the days with a nanny Moretti had hired, a grandmother type named Rose, who actually seemed to enjoy playing dinosaurs and didn't look at Ava like she was a gold digger who'd trapped a rich man. Rose treated the arrangement like it was perfectly normal for single mothers to move into penthouses with men they barely knew. Maybe in Moretti's world, it was. By Friday evening, Ava stood in front of her closet staring at dresses that cost more than her car used to be worth, and trying to remember Elena's instructions about posture and eye contact and how to smile like you weren't terrified. She chose a black dress that Elena had called understated elegance. Simple lines, no flashy jewelry, nothing that screamed for attention. Her ankle was healing but still required the brace hidden beneath the dress's long hem. Her hands shook slightly as she fastened the delicate clasp of the necklace Moretti had left on her dresser that morning with a note that just said, "This belonged to my mother." When she emerged from her room, Moretti was waiting in the living area wearing a tuxedo that probably cost more than Ava's entire wardrobe. He looked like he'd been carved from marble and taught to move, dangerous and beautiful in the way that apex predators were beautiful. He saw her and went very still. "You look—" He stopped himself, and something flickered across his face that Ava couldn't quite read. "You look perfect." "I look terrified." "That too. But they won't be able to tell." He crossed the room and offered his arm. "Ready?" "No." "Good. Uncertainty keeps you sharp." He glanced toward Ellie's room where Rose was reading a bedtime story. "She'll be safe here. Rose has worked for me for 5 years. No one gets past her without going through a minimum of 3 armed men stationed in the building." "You keep armed guards in a residential building?" "I keep armed guards everywhere I have assets worth protecting." His eyes met hers. "And as of last week, that includes you and Ellie." They rode the elevator down in silence, and Ava tried not to think about how this felt like descending into a different world where the rules she'd spent a lifetime learning didn't apply. The lobby security nodded as they passed. The SUV waiting outside had tinted windows, and the kind of presence that made other cars give it space on the road. The Fairmont Olympic Hotel rose against the Seattle skyline like a monument to old money and older power. Photographers lined the red carpet outside, and Ava's pulse kicked into overdrive as she realized they were about to walk into a room full of cameras and questions. "Just breathe," Moretti said quietly as the SUV pulled up to the entrance. "Remember what Elena taught you. You're not a waitress from a diner anymore. You're a woman who belongs here because I say you belong here. And what I say in this city becomes truth." The door opened, cameras flashed like lightning, and Ava stepped out into her new life holding the arm of Seattle's most dangerous man, pretending she knew what the hell she was doing. The crowd swallowed them immediately. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns that cost more than down payments on houses, all of them turning to see who'd arrived with Lucien Moretti. Ava felt their eyes like physical touches, cataloging her dress, her jewelry, her face, trying to figure out who she was and what she meant. "Smile," Moretti murmured. "They're predators. Don't let them see fear." Ava smiled. She'd perfected the expression serving coffee to drunk men at 3 in the morning. Pleasant, unthreatening, completely empty of genuine emotion. "Lucien!" A man broke from the crowd, his hand already extended. "Didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Congressman Pierce." Moretti shook his hand with the grip of someone who knew exactly how much pressure to apply without crushing bones. "Surprising evening for both of us, then." Pierce's eyes slid to Ava. "And who's this?" "Ava Mercer." Ava extended her hand before Moretti could answer. "Pleasure to meet you, Congressman." Pierce took her hand and held it a fraction of a second too long. "Lucien's kept you very well hidden. How long have you two been—" "Long enough that I don't feel the need to justify it to politicians," Moretti said smoothly, reclaiming Ava's hand and tucking it back through his arm. "If you'll excuse us, we should make our donation and find our table." He guided Ava away before Pierce could respond, moving through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd spent years learning how to navigate rooms full of people who wanted something from him. "That was Congressman Malcolm Pierce," Moretti said quietly. "He takes bribes from every developer in King County and votes however his biggest donor tells him to. He's also been trying to get evidence against me for 3 years. So bringing me here wasn't just about looking human. It was about sending a message." Moretti stopped at the bar and ordered 2 glasses of champagne. Before tonight, Pierce thought he understood me. Now he's wondering what else he's gotten wrong. The champagne arrived and Ava took a sip, letting the bubbles explode against her tongue while she tried to process the game being played around her. Everyone in this room was performing, smiling while they measured threats, laughing while they calculated advantages. It was just like Marino's diner, actually. Same desperate scramble for power and position, just more expensive clothes. "Lucien Moretti." A woman's voice cut through the ambient noise like a knife through silk. I heard rumors you'd be here, but I didn't believe them. Ava turned and found herself facing a woman who looked like she'd been engineered in a laboratory designed to create intimidating beauty. Tall, elegant, with dark hair pulled back in a severe style that somehow made her look more dangerous rather than less. She wore a red dress that probably cost more than Ava's entire wardrobe and carried herself like someone accustomed to getting whatever she wanted. Diana. Moretti's voice had gone carefully neutral. I didn't know you were on the guest list. Last-minute addition. Richard insisted. She turned her attention to Ava, and the assessment in her eyes was surgical. And you must be the woman everyone's been whispering about. Ava Mercer. Ava extended her hand, remembering Elena's instructions about maintaining eye contact and showing confidence even when you felt none. And you are? Diana Hartwell. Senator Diana Hartwell. The woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. Lucien and I have history. The pause before history hung in the air like smoke from a warning flare. Moretti's jaw tightened infinitesimally. Ancient history. Is it? Diana's eyes never left Ava's face. I remember it differently. Ava felt like she was watching a conversation in a language she didn't speak. All subtext and buried meanings and references to a past she hadn't been part of. But she remembered what Elena had taught her. When cornered, deflect with boredom rather than panic. That's the thing about history, Ava said, taking another sip of champagne. It's only interesting if you weren't there when it happened. Otherwise, it's just memory. And memories get boring when you've lived them once already. Diana's smile sharpened. Clever. Where did you find her, Lucien? She's much brighter than the usual. Careful. Moretti's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow cut through the ambient noise like a blade. You're about to say something you'll regret. Am I? Diana glanced between them. I'm just curious what changed. Last time we spoke, you told me you'd never risk bringing someone into your world. Too dangerous, you said. Too much liability. And yet here you are with, Ava is none of your concern. Moretti's expression had gone cold enough to drop the temperature in their immediate vicinity. And if I hear you've been spreading speculation about her, we'll have a very different conversation, the kind that ends with your political career in ashes. You always did know how to threaten people, Lucien. Diana's smile never wavered. It was one of your more attractive qualities. She walked away, and Ava released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Who was that? A mistake. Moretti's voice was flat. From before I learned to be more careful about who I trusted. She sounded like she was more than a mistake. She was. Once. He drained his champagne in a single swallow. 3 years ago, Diana and I had an arrangement similar to the one you and I have now. Business, mostly. Occasional appearances together at events like this. She helped humanize me. I helped legitimize her political career. What happened? She decided business wasn't enough. She wanted marriage, commitment, access to my empire. When I refused, she tried to leverage information she'd learned about my operations to force my hand. His eyes were distant, focused on something Ava couldn't see. I had to spend 6 months and a significant amount of money making sure she understood that threatening me was a terminal mistake. And yet she's still here, still a senator. Because I'm not a monster who destroys everyone who crosses me. I just make sure they understand the cost of trying it again. He turned his attention back to Ava. But it's a reminder of why this arrangement has rules. Why trust matters. Diana had access to information about my life, my business, my vulnerabilities. She tried to weaponize that access when she didn't get what she wanted. The unspoken question hung between them. Will you do the same? I'm not Diana, Ava said quietly. I know. He set down his empty glass. But she's proof that good intentions aren't enough. That being careful who you trust is the difference between survival and destruction. Is that why you're telling me? So I understand what happens if I betray you? I'm telling you so you understand why some people in this room will try to turn you against me, because they see you as Diana 2.0, another woman who will eventually want more than I'm willing to give. Before Ava could respond, a man approached from the crowd, older, silver-haired, with the kind of distinguished appearance that came from genetics and expensive tailors working in perfect harmony. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never encountered a door that didn't open for him. Moretti. His voice carried the particular authority of men who'd spent lifetimes being obeyed. Surprised to see you at a children's charity event. Usually you're more interested in adult problems. Castellano. Moretti's entire body language shifted, became harder, more dangerous. I could say the same about you. Aren't these events usually beneath your family's notice? So this was Richard Castellano, the man whose name had come up in Moretti's office as an escalating situation. Ava studied him carefully. The expensive tuxedo, the rings that probably cost more than cars, the way he held himself like royalty surveying peasants. Times change, Castellano's eyes slid to Ava. And who's this? Your latest acquisition? The word landed like a slap. Moretti's hand on Ava's back tightened infinitesimally. This is Ava Mercer, and she's not an acquisition. She's under my protection, which means you speak to her with respect or you don't speak to her at all. Touchy. Castellano smiled, but there was no warmth in it. She must be special if you're willing to make threats at a charity gala in front of 500 witnesses. She is, and they're not threats, they're promises. The two men stared at each other across 3 feet of expensive carpet, and Ava felt the violence simmering beneath their polite words like lava under a thin crust. This wasn't just business rivalry. This was personal hatred dressed up in tuxedos and smiles. Gentlemen. A new voice broke the tension, an older woman in a silver gown who materialized between them with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent decades managing powerful men. Let's not forget we're here for the children. Whatever business you have can wait until after the auction, surely. Castellano's smile widened. Of course, Mrs. Wellington. My apologies. He turned back to Moretti, and the smile dropped. We should talk, soon, about territorial boundaries and mutual respect. We should. Moretti's voice was flat. My office. Monday. 10 a.m. Come alone. I always conduct business with proper security. Then conduct it somewhere else. You want to meet with me, you do it on my terms. Otherwise we can handle this the way our fathers would have, badly and with significant collateral damage. Castellano's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly and walked away, leaving Ava standing beside Moretti feeling like she'd just witnessed the prelude to something violent. That was him, she said quietly. The escalating situation. Yes. What does he want? The same thing everyone in this room wants. Moretti guided her toward their table, his hand still on her back. More than what they have, and they don't care who they destroy to get it. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully neutral conversations. Ava met politicians who smiled too wide and businessmen who shook hands like they were testing grip strength for weakness. She nodded at the right moments, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and watched Moretti navigate the crowd with the skill of someone who'd spent years learning how to be a predator disguised as a guest. By the time they left, Ava's ankle was throbbing, and her face hurt from maintaining the pleasant mask Elena had taught her to wear. They rode home in silence until Moretti finally spoke. You did well tonight. I smiled and pretended I belonged there. That's not exactly impressive. You held your own with Diana. You didn't flinch when Castellano tried to intimidate you. You made me look like someone capable of caring about something other than power. He glanced at her. That's more impressive than you think. The SUV pulled up to the tower, and they rode the elevator up to the penthouse, where Rose reported that Ellie had gone to bed without incident and that everything had been quiet. After Rose left, Ava stood at the windows looking out at Seattle while Moretti poured himself a drink. Diana asked me what changed, Ava said quietly. Why you're willing to risk bringing someone into your world now when you told her you never would. And what did you tell her? Nothing, because I don't know the answer. Moretti was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. My mother spent the last 5 years of her life terrified that my world would destroy her. She watched me become colder, harder, more like the men who'd killed my father. By the time she died, she barely recognized me. Her last words were asking me if I remembered what kindness felt like. He took a drink, and Ava saw his hand shake slightly. I didn't. I'd spent so long being the monster everyone needed me to be that I'd forgotten there were other ways to exist. Then you fell in a diner and I carried you out into the rain, and for the first time in years, I felt something other than anger or ambition. He turned to face her. You and Ellie reminded me that people can be soft without being weak. that caring about something doesn't automatically make you vulnerable. It does, though, Ava said. Doesn't it? Everything that matters makes you vulnerable. Yes, but maybe vulnerability is worth the risk. Maybe spending your whole life afraid of being hurt is worse than actually getting hurt. They stood in silence, the weight of the confession settling between them. I should check on Ellie, Ava said finally. Of course. She turned toward the hallway, then stopped. Lucien? Yes? Tonight, when Castellano called me your acquisition, I should have broken his jaw for that. I'm glad you didn't, because what you said after mattered more, that I'm under your protection, that I'm not something you bought. She met his eyes. Thank you for that. You're not something I bought, Ava. You're... He stopped himself as if realizing he was about to say something dangerous. You're someone I'm choosing to protect. There's a difference. Ava nodded and went to check on Ellie, who was sleeping soundly surrounded by dinosaurs. She stood in the doorway watching her daughter breathe, thinking about choices and protection and the difference between being acquired and being chosen. Then she went to her own room, lay in bed, and stared at the ceiling while her mind raced through everything that had happened. Diana's warning about trust and betrayal, Castellano's threats dressed up as business discussions, the way Moretti had looked at her when he admitted she'd reminded him how to feel something other than anger. And somewhere beneath all of it, the terrifying realization that this wasn't just an arrangement anymore. It was becoming something more complicated, something that felt suspiciously like... Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Unknown. We need to talk about Lucien Moretti. What he's not telling you. What you need to know before this arrangement destroys you. The coffee shop on Pine Street. Tomorrow. 2 p.m. Come alone. Ava stared at the message, her heart hammering against her ribs. Someone was already trying to turn her against him, and she had less than 24 hours to decide whether she was going to walk into that meeting or tell Moretti about it and watch him destroy whoever had sent the message. The choice felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in the dark, unable to see whether the ground below was solid or just more empty space waiting to swallow her whole. She set the phone down without responding and closed her eyes, knowing sleep wouldn't come easy. Not when she'd just realized that protecting Ellie meant learning to navigate a world where everyone smiled while holding knives behind their backs, where trust was currency and betrayal was just another cost of doing business. She'd survived poverty by learning to calculate every risk and every cost. Now she needed to survive wealth by learning the same skills in a language she barely spoke. And the first test was waiting for her tomorrow at 2 p.m. in a coffee shop on Pine Street, where someone was going to try to convince her that the man who'd given her safety was actually her greatest threat. Ava didn't sleep. She lay in the expensive bed staring at the ceiling while her phone sat on the nightstand like a live grenade, the message from the unknown number burning itself into her retinas every time she closed her eyes. The coffee shop on Pine Street, tomorrow, 2 p.m. Come alone. By the time dawn broke over Seattle, she'd made her decision. She was going to that meeting, not because she doubted Moretti, not because she trusted whoever had sent the message, but because the only way to survive in this world was to understand the threats before they became fatal, and whoever was reaching out to her knew something they thought was important enough to risk Moretti's wrath. That alone made it worth hearing. She checked on Ellie at 6 a.m. and found her daughter already awake, building a fortress out of pillows while dinosaurs staged an elaborate battle across the race car bed. For a moment, Ava just stood in the doorway watching her daughter exist in a world where the biggest threat was herbivores versus carnivores, and safety was measured in stuffed animals and blankets. Mama, Ellie spotted her and grinned. The T-Rex is winning, but the Triceratops has a secret plan. That's very strategic of him. What's strategic mean? It means he's smart, like you. Rose arrived at 7 to take over, and Ava spent the morning trying to act normal while her mind raced through every possible scenario. She ate breakfast she couldn't taste. She went through the physical therapy exercises Dr. Chen had prescribed for her ankle. She studied the files Moretti had given her on Seattle's power players, memorizing faces and names and the particular flavors of corruption each one represented. Moretti himself was gone. Marco had mentioned something about a meeting downtown that would take most of the day. Part of Ava was relieved. She wouldn't have to lie to his face about where she was going. The other part recognized that relief as cowardice. At 1:30 p.m., she told Rose she needed to run an errand. Mr. Moretti prefers you don't leave without security, Rose said carefully. I'm just going to pick up some personal items. I'll be back in an hour. Rose's expression suggested she knew that was bullshit, but she was too professional to say so. Be careful. Ava took a cab instead of asking Marco for a ride, paying in cash and giving the driver an intersection 2 blocks from the actual coffee shop. The ankle brace hidden beneath her jeans made walking uncomfortable, but she pushed through the discomfort with the practice of someone who'd spent years ignoring her body's protests. Pine Street was the kind of neighborhood where Seattle's working class and artistic pretensions collided. Vintage shops next to artisanal bakeries, tattoo parlors beside boutiques selling hand-thrown pottery that cost more than rent. The coffee shop was called The Grind, which was either painfully on the nose or deliberately ironic, and it smelled like espresso and desperation when Ava pushed through the door. She scanned the room and immediately spotted the person who'd sent the message. Diana Hartwell sat in the back corner, dressed down in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than Ava's entire wardrobe used to, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. She looked less like a senator and more like a woman who'd learned to blend in when necessary. Ava's stomach dropped. She should have told Moretti. Should have shown him the message and let him handle this. But it was too late now. Diana had already seen her, was already gesturing to the empty chair across from her with the confidence of someone who'd expected Ava to show up. Ava crossed the coffee shop and sat down before she could talk herself out of it. You came, Diana said. I wasn't sure you would. You made it sound urgent. It is. Diana pushed a coffee across the table, already ordered, already prepared, like she'd been certain Ava would arrive. Latte, 2 sugars. That's how you take it, right? The fact that Diana knew how Ava took her coffee sent ice down her spine. How long have you been watching me? Since the moment Lucien brought you home from that diner. Diana's expression was neutral, clinical. I needed to know who you were, what you wanted from him, whether you were another threat I needed to monitor. And what did you decide? That you're either exactly what you appear to be, a desperate single mother who got lucky, or you're the best operative I've ever seen. Diana leaned forward. I'm still not sure which. I'm not an operative. That's what I would say if I were an operative. Diana smiled without warmth. But let's assume you're telling the truth. Let's assume you're just a woman trying to provide for her daughter. In that case, you need to hear what I'm about to tell you before Lucien destroys you the way he destroys everyone who gets too close. Ava's pulse kicked up, but she kept her expression neutral. I'm listening. 3 years ago, Lucien and I had an arrangement. Business, mostly. I helped legitimize his image. He helped fund my political campaigns. It was mutually beneficial. Professional. Diana's jaw tightened. Then I made the mistake of thinking we had something more. That the nights he spent at my apartment and the conversations we had about building a future meant something beyond strategic alliance. He told me, Ava said quietly, about how you tried to leverage information against him when he wouldn't commit. Is that what he said? Diana's laugh was bitter. That I tried to force his hand through blackmail? That I was the villain in our story? Wasn't it true? The truth is more complicated. Yes, I threatened to expose certain business operations if he walked away. But do you know why I did that? Diana's eyes were hard. Because I just discovered I was pregnant with his child. The words landed like a punch to Ava's chest. What? Pregnant, 10 weeks. I went to him terrified and hopeful, thinking maybe this would be the thing that finally broke through his walls. That he'd want to be a father, that we'd build something real. Diana's voice cracked slightly. He gave me $50,000 and the number for a private clinic, told me to take care of it or he'd make sure I never held political office again. Ava felt the room tilt. I don't believe you. I didn't expect you to. That's why I brought proof. Diana pulled out her phone and slid it across the table. On the screen was a medical record, ultrasound images, dates, a doctor's notes confirming a pregnancy. Diana Hartwell's name at the top. Ava stared at the documents, feeling sick. He threatened my career, Ava. My entire future. Unless I terminated the pregnancy and signed an NDA, promising never to mention it again. Diana took her phone back. So yes, I tried to fight back. I threatened to expose his operations because I was terrified and angry and desperate. But he made sure I understood the cost of that choice. By the time his lawyers and his people were done with me, I'd lost the pregnancy to stress and I'd signed away my right to ever speak about what he'd done. Why are you telling me this? Because you have a daughter, and I need you to understand what kind of man you're trusting with her safety. Diana's expression was intense. Lucien Moretti doesn't protect children. He eliminates complications, and the moment you or Ellie become inconvenient, he'll erase you both with the same efficiency he uses to erase anyone who threatens his empire. Ava's hands clenched around the coffee cup. He told me he doesn't harm children, that it's a line he's never crossed. He told me he'd never force a woman to choose between her career and her child. People lie, Ava, especially people with empires built on violence and fear. Diana leaned back. I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because I see myself in you. A woman who thought she could trust a monster just because he occasionally acts human. Get out before you end up like me, before he destroys everything you care about and leaves you with nothing but NDAs and nightmares. Ava stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. I need to go. He'll know we met. Diana's voice followed her toward the door. He has people everywhere. By the time you get back to the penthouse, he'll already have a story prepared about why I'm lying, why I'm trying to turn you against him. And you'll want to believe him because believing him is easier than accepting you've brought your daughter into a snake pit. Ava pushed out of this coffee shop into cold Seattle air that tasted like rain and regret. Her hand shook as she flagged down a cab, and the entire ride back to the tower she stared out the window trying to reconcile two completely different versions of the same man. The Lucien Moretti who'd carried her out of a diner and prescribed expensive medication and filled a room with dinosaurs for a child he'd never met. And the Lucien Moretti who'd threatened Diana's career into ashes and forced her to terminate a pregnancy she'd wanted to keep. Which one was real? Or were they both real, existing simultaneously, kindness and cruelty wearing the same expensive suit? The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt like ascending toward judgment. When the doors opened, Moretti was standing in the living room looking out the windows with a phone pressed to his ear. He turned as Ava entered and something flickered across his face when he saw her expression. He ended the call without saying goodbye. Where were you? The question was delivered in a tone that suggested he already knew the answer. I went out, Ava said, trying to keep her voice steady. I needed air. You met with Diana Hartwell at a coffee shop on Pine Street. Not a question, a statement of fact delivered with surgical precision. What did she tell you? Ava's stomach dropped. How did you... I have security following you whenever you leave this building. I thought I made that clear. Moretti moved closer, and Ava saw something dangerous in his expression. Not anger exactly, but something colder. What did Diana tell you, Ava? That you got her pregnant 3 years ago. That you threatened her career unless she terminated it and signed an NDA. The words came out harder than Ava intended. Is it true? Moretti's expression went completely blank. For a long moment, he just stood there, and Ava realized with growing horror that the silence itself was confirmation. It's true, he said finally. The admission hit her like a physical blow. You told me you don't harm children. I don't. You forced a woman to... I didn't force anything. Moretti's voice was flat. I gave Diana options and resources. What she chose to do with them was her decision. You threatened her career. I told her the truth. That having a child would complicate both our lives in ways that would eventually destroy what we'd built. That I wasn't capable of being a father. That bringing a child into my world was cruel and dangerous. His jaw tightened. And yes, I made it clear that if she chose to keep the pregnancy despite those realities, there would be professional consequences. Because I don't do well with ultimatums, Ava. I don't respond to people trying to trap me through biology. She wasn't trying to trap you. She was terrified. She was leveraging a pregnancy to force commitment I'd explicitly said I'd never give. That's the definition of a trap. Moretti's eyes were hard. And before you decide I'm the monster Diana wants you to believe I am, you should know the whole story, not just the parts designed to turn you against me. Then tell me the whole story. Diana and I had a business arrangement. No emotions, no expectations of commitment. She knew the terms when she agreed to them. Then she stopped taking her birth control without telling me, got pregnant, and showed up at my door acting like it was some romantic surprise rather than a calculated move to change the nature of our relationship. His voice was cold enough to burn. So yes, I gave her money and told her to handle it. Because I'm not father material, Ava. I never pretended to be. And I won't bring a child into this world just because someone decides biology should override explicit agreements. Bui o abipasmamki. Ava felt like she was drowning. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know Diana isn't the one being honest? You don't. That's the nature of trust. Moretti moved to the bar and poured himself a drink with hands that were completely steady. But ask yourself this. If Diana was the victim in our story, why did she wait 3 years to tell you about it? Why reach out now, when you're finally settling in, rather than warning you before you moved in? Maybe she was trying to protect me from making her mistakes. Or maybe she saw you with me at the gala and realized I'm capable of caring about someone in ways I never cared about her. And that made her angry enough to weaponize a half-truth designed to destroy what we're building. He took a drink. Diana Hartwell is a brilliant politician. She knows exactly which story to tell to achieve maximum damage, and you walked right into her trap. So I'm supposed to just believe you? Take your word over hers? I'm not asking you to take anyone's word. I'm asking you to look at actions instead of stories. Moretti set down his glass. I could have left you bleeding on that diner floor. I could have paid your hospital bills and never seen you again. I could have brought you here, used you for appearances, and treated you like the acquisition Castellano called you. But I didn't. I gave Ellie a room full of toys I picked out myself. I'm paying for your medical care without asking anything in return except your presence at events. I've protected you from men in my own organization who questioned your presence. He moved closer and Ava saw something raw in his expression. I told you I'm not a good man. I've done terrible things to terrible people. But I have never lied to you about who I am or what I'm capable of. Diana is selling you a version of me designed to make you afraid. I'm showing you the truth, that I'm both the monster who threatened her career and the man who carried you out of a diner because seeing you hurt bothered me in ways I didn't expect. Both are real. Both are me. You get to decide which version matters more. Ava's mind raced. He was right about one thing. Diana's story did feel calculated, delivered with the precision of someone who knew exactly which emotional buttons to push. But Moretti's defense felt equally constructed, built from logic and justification rather than genuine remorse. Did you love her? Ava asked quietly. Diana. Did you ever love her? No. But you slept with her. You spent time with her. You built something. I built a strategic alliance that occasionally involved physical intimacy. That's not love. That's convenience. His expression softened slightly. Diana wanted me to love her. She spent 2 years trying to transform business into romance. And when I refused to pretend I felt something I didn't, she tried to force the issue through pregnancy. That's not love either, Ava. That's desperation. And what about me? What am I to you? The question hung in the air like smoke. Moretti was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. I don't know yet. That's the honest answer. You're not an arrangement anymore. You stopped being just business the moment I realized I enjoyed coming home to find you and Ellie here. But I don't know what that means because I've never let myself care about anyone since my mother died. Caring makes you weak, makes you vulnerable, gives people leverage to destroy you. Then why risk it? Because apparently I'm tired of being invulnerable. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets. My mother spent the last years of her life watching me become something she didn't recognize. I saw the disappointment in her eyes every time she looked at me. And when she died, I promised myself I'd never care about anyone enough to see that disappointment again. Then you fell in front of me and I carried you out into the rain, and for the first time in years, I felt like maybe being human was worth the risk. Ava's chest tightened. I want to believe you. But Diana's story is easier to accept because it confirms your worst fears, that you've made a terrible mistake, that you've endangered Ellie by trusting a monster. He turned to face her. I can't make you believe me, Ava. I can only tell you that everything I've done since you moved in has been designed to keep you and Ellie safe. Even the security following you, that wasn't about control. That was about making sure people like Diana couldn't corner you without me knowing. So you're admitting you don't trust me? I'm admitting I don't trust anyone in my world not to try to use you against me. There's a difference. Ava's phone buzzed. She pulled it out and felt her blood run cold. Unknown. Ask him about Caleb Ryder. Ask him what he did after you gave him the name. Then decide if you still feel safe. She looked up at Moretti, and something in her expression must have given away the message's content because his jaw tightened. What did she send you? She wants me to ask about Caleb. Ava's voice was barely above a whisper. My ex. The one who stole my money and left me pregnant. Moretti's expression went carefully blank. What about him? What did you do, Lucien? After I told you his name, what did you do? I recovered your money. How? Does it matter? It matters to me. Ava's voice cracked. Tell me what you did. Moretti was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and completely devoid of emotion. I had Marco and 2 others pay him a visit. We explained that stealing from you was a mistake that required correction. He was resistant at first, but eventually he became cooperative. We recovered every dollar he took, plus interest. Then we made sure he understood that if he ever came near you or Ellie again, the consequences would be significantly worse. Define cooperative. Ava, define it. His eyes met hers. We broke 3 of his fingers and his collarbone. We held him off a 6th-floor balcony until he told us where he'd hidden the money. Then we made him sign documents transferring everything back to you, and we left him with a clear understanding that his life depended on his continued absence from yours. The room spun. Ava had known, of course she'd known, that Moretti was capable of violence. But hearing him describe torturing someone, even someone like Caleb who deserved every consequence, made her stomach turn. You tortured him. I recovered what was stolen from you. By breaking bones and threatening to throw him off a balcony. By using the only language men like Caleb understand, pain and fear. Moretti's voice didn't rise, but it got colder. Would you prefer I'd asked nicely? Filed a police report and waited for a justice system that doesn't give a damn about single mothers who get conned by charming criminals? Or should I have just ignored it entirely and let him keep the money your parents left you? I didn't ask you to hurt him. You didn't have to. The moment you told me his name, you knew what I was. You knew what I was capable of, and some part of you wanted him punished even if you won't admit that to yourself. His eyes were hard. Don't pretend you're disgusted by violence you were happy to benefit from. That makes you a hypocrite, not a victim. The accusation hit harder than it should have because part of it was true. Part of her had been relieved when Moretti returned her money. Part of her had enjoyed knowing Caleb finally faced consequences. But she'd never asked for torture, never wanted blood on her hands. I need to leave, Ava said quietly. Where? I don't know, anywhere, Her voice broke. I need to think. I need to figure out if I can live with what you are. You've been living with what I am for 2 weeks. I've been living with the version of you that plays with dinosaurs and orders expensive medical care. Not the version that breaks bones and threatens murder. She moved toward the hallway. I need time, Lucien. I need to... The elevator chimed. Both of them turned as Marco burst into the penthouse, his expression grim. Boss, we have a situation. Moretti's entire demeanor shifted. What kind of situation? Castellano just hit 3 of our operations simultaneously. Warehouses in Georgetown, Ballard, and Sodu. He's making a move. Casualties? 2 dead, 4 wounded. He's sending a message. Moretti's jaw tightened. Assemble the crew. I want everyone in the conference room in 30 minutes. And get Dr. Chen on standby in case... Boss? Marco's eyes flicked to Ava, then back to Moretti. There's more. Castellano left something at the Georgetown site. A message specifically for you. What message? Marco pulled out his phone and showed Moretti a photo. Ava couldn't see the screen, but she saw Moretti's expression go completely cold in a way that made her blood freeze. Get everyone together now, Moretti said quietly, and triple security on this building. No one gets in or out without my explicit approval. Marco nodded and disappeared back into the elevator. Moretti turned to Ava, and the look on his face made her take an involuntary step backward. What was the message? She asked. A photo of you and Ellie at the playground yesterday with Rose, and a note that said, soft targets make the best leverage. The words turned Ava's blood to ice. He's threatening us. He's threatening me through you, because someone told him you matter to me. Moretti's voice was deadly calm. Someone in my organization or someone close enough to observe us has been feeding Castellano information, and now he knows that hurting you is the fastest way to hurt me. Diana, Ava whispered. She knew we'd met. She could have. Diana is a self-interested politician, not a traitor working with my enemies. This is someone closer. Someone with access to my movements and operations. His hands clenched into fists. Someone who's going to die very slowly once I figure out who they are. What do we do? You and Ellie stay here. Security gets tripled. No one leaves the penthouse until I've handled Castellano and found the leak. He moved toward his office. This building is a fortress. You're safe here. And you? I'm going to war. He stopped at the office door and looked back. I told you bringing you into my world would make you a target. I told you there would be consequences. Now those consequences are here, and I need to handle them before Castellano decides photos aren't enough, and he wants proof of his leverage written in blood. Lucien, I'll keep you safe, Ava. I'll burn Seattle to the ground if that's what it takes. But I can't do that if I'm worrying about whether you believe Diana's version of history or mine. His eyes were hard. So decide right now, are you with me or against me? Because there's no middle ground anymore. Castellano made sure of that when he put you and Ellie in his crosshairs. Ava stood in the expensive penthouse looking at the man who'd saved her from poverty and simultaneously dragged her into a war she didn't understand. She thought about Diana's story and Moretti's violence and Caleb's broken fingers, and Ellie sleeping soundly in a room full of dinosaurs while armed men positioned themselves between her and people who wanted to hurt her because hurting her would hurt someone else. And she realized Diana had been right about one thing. She'd brought her daughter into a snake pit. The only question was whether the snake currently offering them protection was worse than the one circling outside, waiting for an opportunity to strike. I'm with you, Ava heard herself say. But after this is over, after Castellano is handled, we're going to have a very long conversation about trust and violence and what I'm willing to accept to keep Ellie safe. Agreed. Moretti's expression softened slightly. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Because if anything happens to my daughter because of your war, there won't be anywhere in Seattle you can hide from me. Something that might have been respect flickered across his face. Noted. He disappeared into his office, and Ava stood alone in the penthouse, listening to the sound of men gathering for violence while her daughter slept peacefully down the hall, completely unaware that she'd just become leverage in a war between criminals wearing expensive suits and smiling while they plotted murder. Ava moved to Ellie's room and found her still asleep, Mr. Trunk clutched in one hand and the T-Rex in the other. She sat on the edge of the race car bed and watched her daughter breathe, thinking about choices and consequences and the particular kind of mother who'd choose a monster's protection over poverty's slow destruction. Outside the windows, Seattle glittered in the darkness like a kingdom built from broken promises and blood money. And somewhere in that city, a man named Castellano was planning his next move against the king who'd claimed Ava and Ellie as pieces on a chessboard neither of them had asked to be placed on. But maybe that was the truth Diana hadn't wanted to admit. Maybe everyone in Moretti's world was a piece on someone's board. The only difference was whether you were a pawn who got sacrificed without warning, or a queen who learned to move with enough power that sacrificing you cost more than victory was worth. Ava kissed Ellie's forehead and made a silent promise. They'd survive this, whatever it took, whatever she had to become. They'd survive. Because mothers didn't have the luxury of breaking down when their children needed them to be strong. And right now, Ellie needed her mother to be stronger than she'd ever been before. Even if that meant learning to live with blood on her hands and a monster in her bed. The penthouse transformed into a war room within an hour. Men Ava had never seen before materialized in the living space like shadows given human form. All of them armed, all of them carrying the particular stillness that came from years of controlled violence. They moved through Moretti's home with military precision, checking sight lines, reinforcing entry points, turning luxury into a fortress, while Ava sat in Ellie's room reading picture books in a voice that didn't shake even though her hands did. "Mama, why are there so many people here?" Ellie asked, her small hand clutching Mr. Trunk. "Mr. Moretti is having a work meeting, baby. It's boring grown-up stuff." "Are they staying for dinner?" "I don't think so." "Good. I don't like when there's too many peoples." Ellie yawned and burrowed deeper into her pillows. "Can we have mac and cheese tomorrow?" Yeah, baby, whatever you want. Ava stayed until Ellie's breathing evened out into sleep, then carefully extracted herself from the race car bed and moved to the doorway where Rose stood watching the hallway with the alertness of someone who understood exactly how dangerous the situation had become. She's asleep, Ava whispered. Good. Keep her in there until Mr. Moretti says otherwise. Rose's weathered face was grim. I've worked for him 5 years, never seen him like this. Whatever Castellano did, it crossed a line. He threatened us. Me and Ellie. Then Castellano's a dead man. He just doesn't know it yet. Rose's expression softened slightly. Mr. Moretti doesn't make idle promises about protection. If he said you're safe here, you're safe. That man would burn the entire city before he let someone hurt a child under his roof. Ava wanted to believe that, wanted to trust that the violence currently gathering in Moretti's office would be directed outward rather than consuming everything in its path, including the people it was supposed to protect. But Diana's words kept echoing in her head. He eliminates complications. And right now, Ava and Ellie were the biggest complication Moretti had ever allowed into his carefully controlled world. She moved down the hallway toward the office where voices rose and fell in the particular cadence of men planning war. The door was partially open, and Ava could see Moretti standing at his desk surrounded by Marco, Vincent, and a half-dozen others she didn't recognize. A map of Seattle was spread across the mahogany surface, marked with red pins and notations that looked like battle plans. 3 simultaneous hits means he's got at least 20 soldiers willing to move against us. That was Vincent, his voice flat and analytical. And the message at Georgetown tells us he's got intelligence on your personal life. Someone's been feeding him information. Then we find the leak and we plug it. Moretti's voice was cold enough to freeze blood. I want every phone traced, every communication logged, every person in our organization accounted for. Someone sold me out, and when I find them, I'm going to make an example that ensures no one ever considers it again. What about the Hartwell woman? Marco asked. She met with Ava today. Could be she's working with Castellano. Diana's ambitious, not suicidal. She knows what happens to people who ally with my enemies. Moretti's jaw tightened. But monitor her communications anyway. I want to know everyone she's talking to and what she's saying. And Castellano himself? We hit back. Hard. Fast. Before he has time to fortify his positions or make another move. Moretti leaned over the map, his finger tracing routes through the city. He's operating out of the warehouse district near Harbor Island. Too many civilians for a direct assault during the day, but at night we can move without collateral damage. I want 3 teams, 1 on the main building, 2 on his secondary locations in case he's using decoys. Boss. One of the men Ava didn't recognize stepped forward. Castellano's got connections, city officials, judges, cops on his payroll. If we move against him openly, we're starting a war that could bring down attention we don't need. We're already at war. He started it when he put surveillance photos of Ava and Ellie in my lap. Moretti's voice was deadly quiet. I don't care about his connections or his politicians. I care about sending a message that threatening people under my protection is a fatal mistake. Now either help me plan this operation or get out of my way. The room went silent. Vincent spoke carefully. If we're doing this, we need to be surgical. In and out before SWPD even knows something happened. No witnesses, no evidence trail, nothing that connects back to us. Agreed. Which is why we're not leaving anyone alive to report what happened. Moretti straightened. Castellano wanted to make this personal, wanted to turn this into a war about leverage and soft targets. So we're going to show him exactly what happens when you make things personal with me. Ava's stomach turned. She'd known Moretti was capable of violence, had just heard him describe torturing Caleb. But hearing him plan the systematic execution of potentially dozens of people made her realize exactly how deep the monster went beneath his carefully constructed humanity. She must have made a sound because suddenly every head in the room turned toward the doorway where she stood frozen. Moretti's expression shifted from cold calculation to something softer when he saw her. Ava, how long have you been standing there? Long enough. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. You're planning to kill all of them, everyone in Castellano's operation. I'm planning to eliminate a threat before it eliminates us. That's not elimination. That's massacre. The other men shifted uncomfortably, but Moretti's gaze never left Ava's face. Everyone leave. I need to speak with Ava alone. Boss, we need to finalize, Vincent started. Now. The room cleared in seconds, men filing past Ava with expressions that ranged from curiosity to concern. Marco was the last to leave, closing the office door behind him with a soft click that felt like a coffin lid settling into place. Moretti moved around the desk, and Ava saw exhaustion written in the lines around his eyes and the tension in his shoulders. You shouldn't have heard that. But I did. And now I need you to explain how killing potentially innocent people is protecting me and Ellie. There are no innocent people in Castellano's operation. They're soldiers who chose their side knowing the risks, just like my men chose their side. And when the police investigate, when bodies start turning up and reporters start asking questions, how does that keep us safe? The police won't investigate because the police in this city understand there are certain situations they're better off not seeing. Moretti's voice was flat. And reporters who ask the wrong questions tend to find other stories more interesting once they understand the cost of persistence. You're talking about bribes and threats. I'm talking about survival in a world that doesn't operate on the moral principles you learned in whatever suburban neighborhood you grew up in. He moved closer, and Ava fought the urge to step back. Castellano put surveillance photos of your daughter in my hands, Ava. He told me he knows where you go, when you go there, and who's with you. That's not a business negotiation. That's a death threat dressed up in subtext. And the only appropriate response to someone threatening a child under my protection is overwhelming and permanent force. So we become monsters to fight monsters? We were always monsters. You just hadn't seen it up close yet. His eyes were hard. This is who I am, who I've always been. The man who plays dinosaurs with Ellie and the man who plans executions in his office are the same person. You don't get one without the other. Ava's chest tightened. I don't know if I can live with this. Then leave. Take Ellie and go somewhere Castellano can't find you. I'll give you money, new identities, protection until this is resolved. His jaw tightened. But understand that leaving means you're on your own. No guards, no security, no one standing between you and every other predator in this city who might decide a single mother makes an easy target. That's not a choice. That's an ultimatum. That's reality. He turned back to the map spread across his desk. I told you from the beginning this would be dangerous. That being associated with me would make you a target. You chose to stay anyway. Now you get to live with the consequences of that choice. I chose to stay because I thought, I don't know what I thought. Ava's voice cracked. Maybe that you were different. That underneath the violence there was someone who actually cared about protecting people instead of just controlling them. I do care. That's why I'm willing to kill everyone in Castellano's organization to keep you and Ellie safe. Caring doesn't make you gentle, Ava. Sometimes it makes you absolutely vicious. He finally looked at her again. You think I want to do this? You think I enjoy planning operations that end with body bags and blood? I hate it. Every time. But I do it anyway because the alternative is letting people like Castellano believe they can threaten what's mine without consequences. I'm not yours. You live in my home. You sleep under my protection. You eat food I provide and wear clothes I bought. Whether you want to admit it or not, you became mine the moment you accepted my help. His voice was soft but absolute, and I protect what's mine, always, no matter the cost. The possessiveness in his tone should have terrified her. Instead, something in Ava responded to it, some primal part of her brain that recognized protection even when it came wrapped in violence and control. When? She asked quietly. When what? When are you moving against Castellano? Tonight, 2 a.m. when the harbor district is empty and his people are tired. Moretti studied her face. Why? Because if you're going to make me complicit in mass murder, I want to know when it's happening. I want to be awake when you come home with blood on your hands so I can look you in the eye and decide if I can still stand to be in the same room with you. Something flickered across his expression. Respect, maybe, or surprise that she wasn't running. Fair enough. A knock on the door interrupted them. Marco stuck his head in. Boss, we've got a situation. Castellano just made contact. He wants to meet. Moretti's entire body went rigid. When? Now, says he's got something you need to see. Something about the leak in your organization. It's a trap. Obviously. But he also says if you don't come alone in the next hour, The next photos he sends will be a lot less friendly than surveillance shots of a playground. Ava felt ice flood her veins. He's threatening to hurt Ellie. He's threatening to make me think he can hurt Ellie. There's a difference. Moretti's voice was deadly calm. Where does he want to meet? Pier 91, the old shipping terminal. Plenty of sight lines for snipers and ambush points. Perfect place to kill someone and dump their body in the Sound. Moretti moved to his desk and pulled out a handgun from a locked drawer. Tell him I'll be there, and mobilize everyone. I want teams positioned around the terminal, ready to move the moment things go wrong. Boss, this is suicide, even with backup. He's not going to kill me at a meeting. He wants something. Moretti checked the gun with practiced efficiency. Information, leverage, or a demonstration of power. Whatever it is, I need to know what I'm dealing with before we move against him tonight. Let me go instead. Vincent's voice came from the hallway. Or Marco, someone expendable. No one's expendable. And Castellano asked for me specifically. Moretti slid the gun into a holster at the small of his back. This is my war, my responsibility. I'm not sending anyone else to negotiate with a man who's already shown he's willing to threaten children. He moved toward the door, and Ava found herself stepping into his path before she could think better of it. Don't go. I have to. He'll kill you. Maybe, but dying is less terrifying than living in a world where I let threats against you and Ellie go unanswered. His hand came up to cup her face with surprising gentleness. If something happens to me, Marco has instructions. Money, protection, everything you need to disappear. You and Ellie will be safe. I don't want your money. I want you to not walk into an obvious trap. Since when do you care whether I live or die? The question caught Ava off guard because she didn't have a good answer. 3 weeks ago, she'd been a waitress drowning in poverty. 2 weeks ago, she'd moved into this penthouse thinking it was a business arrangement. Yesterday, she'd been listening to Diana describe Moretti as a monster who destroyed everyone who got close. But right now, watching him prepare to walk into potential death, all she felt was terrified that she'd never see him again. I don't know, she said honestly, but apparently I do. So don't die. Something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. I'll do my best. He kissed her forehead, a gesture so unexpected and gentle that Ava froze. And then he was gone, disappearing down the hallway with Marco while Vincent coordinated teams via phone, and the penthouse transformed into organized chaos. Ava stood in the office doorway, feeling like she'd just watched someone walk toward a cliff edge in the dark, unable to see whether there was ground on the other side or just empty space waiting to swallow him whole. Rose appeared at her elbow. Come on, let's check on Ellie, and then you need to eat something. You look like you're about to pass out. I can't eat. Not while he's doing exactly what he's been trained to do since he was 16 years old. Rose guided Ava down the hallway. Mr. Moretti has survived worse than Richard Castellano. He'll come home. And when he does, he's going to need you to be strong enough to handle what happens next. They checked on Ellie, still sleeping peacefully, completely oblivious to the violence swirling around her. And then Rose forced Ava to sit at the kitchen island while she made tea that Ava couldn't taste and sandwiches she couldn't swallow. The minutes crawled by like hours. Vincent coordinated teams from the living room, his voice a constant low murmur of tactical planning and contingency strategies. Armed men positioned themselves throughout the penthouse, weapons visible now that the pretense of civility had been abandoned. The fortress was fully engaged, locked down against external threats, while its king walked into potential death alone. Ava's phone buzzed. Unknown. He's going to die tonight. Castellano doesn't negotiate. He eliminates threats. And Lucien Moretti is the biggest threat he's ever faced. If you care about Ellie, start planning your exit now. Diana. Still trying to turn her, still pushing the narrative that Moretti was the danger rather than the protection. Ava deleted the message without responding. An hour passed, then another. By the time Vincent's phone finally rang, Ava had worn a path in the hardwood floors and chewed her thumbnail bloody. She watched Vincent answer, watched his expression shift from tense to shocked to something that might have been relief. Boss is alive, Vincent said when he hung up. He's on his way back. Everyone stand down but maintain defensive positions. We're not clear yet. What happened? Ava asked. He'll explain when he gets here, but apparently Castellano had some interesting information to share. Vincent's expression was grim. and boss says to get Carlo here. Now. Armed escort. Carlo. The young soldier who'd questioned Ava's presence and called her a liability, the one who'd looked at her with contempt. Ava's stomach dropped because she suddenly understood what kind of interesting information Castellano might have shared. 20 minutes later, the elevator chimed and Moretti stepped into the penthouse looking like he'd walked through hell and decided to bring some of it home with him. His suit was rumpled, his jaw tight, and his eyes held the particular coldness that came from making decisions that couldn't be unmade. He saw Ava standing in the living room and something in his expression softened for just a moment before hardening again. "Where's Carlo?" "On his way up now," Vincent said. "Boss, what did Castellano say?" "He gave me proof. Photos, communications, bank transfers, everything I needed to confirm who's been feeding him information about my operations and my personal life." Moretti's voice was flat. "Carlo's been on Castellano's payroll for 8 months. Every move we've made, every strategy we've planned, every piece of personal information about Ava and Ellie, all of it went straight to our enemy." The room went silent. Ava felt sick. Carlo had been in this penthouse, had seen Ellie, had known exactly where they were vulnerable, and had sold that information to a man who wanted to hurt them. "Why would Castellano give you that information?" Vincent asked carefully. "Why expose his own asset?" "Because Carlo outlived his usefulness. Castellano got what he needed. Enough intelligence to plan his attacks, and enough leverage to force this meeting. Now he's cleaning house and trying to destabilize my organization by making me question everyone's loyalty." Moretti's jaw tightened. "And it's working, because right now I don't know who else might be selling me out." The elevator chimed again. Carlo stepped out flanked by 2 guards who looked like they were restraining themselves from violence with significant effort. The younger man's eyes widened when he saw everyone staring at him, and Ava watched realization dawn across his face that his betrayal had been discovered. "Boss, I can explain," Carlo started. Moretti moved so fast Ava barely saw it. One moment he was standing by the window. The next he had Carlo slammed against the wall with enough force to crack plaster, his forearm across the younger man's throat. "You sold photos of a 3-year-old child to my enemy." Moretti's voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute violence. "Explain that." "He paid me! 50,000 just for basic information, another 100 for—" Carlo choked as Moretti's arm pressed harder. I never thought he'd actually hurt anyone." "You didn't think. That's your defense. You didn't think that selling intelligence about a child's location to a man currently at war with me might have consequences." Moretti's eyes were dead. "How much for the playground photos? The ones showing exactly where Ellie goes and when she's most vulnerable? 20,000. But I swear I told him not to. I said the kid was off limits." "You told Richard Castellano that limits exist?" Moretti laughed, and the sound was colder than anything Ava had ever heard. "You're not just a traitor, you're stupid." He released Carlo, and the younger man collapsed to the floor, gasping. Moretti pulled the gun from his holster and aimed it at Carlo's head with hands that didn't shake. "Boss, wait." Vincent moved forward carefully. "If you do this here, we have to deal with cleanup. Police questions, complications we don't need right now. Then I'll do it somewhere else. Marco, take him to the Georgetown warehouse, the one Castellano hit earlier. Poetic justice." Moretti's voice was flat. "And make it slow. I want him to understand exactly what he's done, what he cost us, what he made me risk by forcing me to meet with Castellano." Carlo was crying now, begging, scrambling backward across expensive hardwood while armed men closed in around him. "Please, please, I'm sorry. I'll do anything. I'll testify against Castellano. You'll die." Moretti's expression didn't change. "The only question is how long it takes and how much you suffer first. That's the mercy I'm offering. A choice in how your betrayal ends." Ava watched 2 guards haul Carlo to his feet and drag him toward the elevator. The younger man was sobbing, pleading, promising information and cooperation and anything else that might buy him another minute of life. The elevator doors closed on his begging, and then he was gone. The penthouse was silent except for the rain hammering against bulletproof windows. Moretti stood in the center of the room holding a gun and looking like something carved from ice and fury. When he finally spoke, his voice was directed at everyone present. "I want every communication device checked, every financial record audited, every person in this organization accounted for and verified. If Carlo was selling me out, there might be others, and I will find them. I will root out every rat in my organization, and I will make examples that ensure no one ever forgets the cost of betrayal. Yes, boss. Vincent's voice was carefully neutral. And someone get Dr. Chen on call. When we move against Castellano tonight, I want medical support ready. Because this ends now. No more threats. No more games. We're going to eliminate this problem permanently. The men dispersed, leaving Moretti alone with Ava in the center of the expensive penthouse that suddenly felt more like a mausoleum than a home. You're really going to kill him, Ava said quietly. Carlo. Slowly. Yes. Because he sold information. Because he sold information about your daughter to a man who wanted to use her as leverage against me. Moretti finally looked at her, and Ava saw something raw in his expression. You wanted to know what I'm capable of. Now you know. This is what I do to people who threaten what's mine, and I don't lose sleep over it. Should I be afraid of you? Probably. Most people are. He set the gun down on the coffee table between them. But if you're asking whether I'd ever hurt you or Ellie, the answer is no. You're the thing I'm protecting, not the thing I'm protecting against. There's a difference. Ava's pulse hammered in her throat. What did Castellano want at the meeting? He wanted to offer me a deal. Split the city 50-50, his operations north of the canal, mine south. He keeps his territory, I keep mine, and we both profit from reduced conflict. And what did you say? I said no. Moretti moved to the windows, looking out at Seattle glittering in the darkness. Because men like Castellano don't honor deals. They honor power. And the moment he senses weakness, he'll violate whatever agreement we make and take everything. So the only option is to eliminate him completely. Remove the threat permanently rather than delay it. By killing everyone in his organization. By sending a message that threatening me has consequences that extend beyond just the person who made the threat. That betrayal costs not just you, but everyone connected to you. His reflection in the glass was grim. It's brutal. It's excessive. And it's the only language this world understands. Ava thought about Carlo being dragged to a warehouse to die slowly. About the operation Moretti was planning that would end with dozens dead. About the particular kind of protection that required blood sacrifice to maintain. When you come back tonight, she said quietly, after you've killed Castellano and everyone else. When you walk through that door covered in whatever you've done to keep us safe, I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you are anymore. Good. Illusions get people killed. But I'm also not going to pretend I'm not grateful, that I don't understand why you're doing this. She met his eyes in the window's reflection. My daughter is safe because you're willing to be the monster everyone thinks you are. That's not romantic, it's not comfortable, but it's real. And real is better than the pretty lies I used to tell myself about how the world works. Moretti turned to face her. You're not going to leave. No. Even knowing what I'm about to do. Especially knowing what you're about to do. Ava moved closer. Because I finally understand something important. The world isn't divided into good people and bad people. It's divided into people who protect what they love and people who exploit what others love. You're brutal and violent, and you probably don't deserve forgiveness for half the things you've done. But you protect Ellie like she's yours. And right now, that matters more than anything else. Something shifted in Moretti's expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief that he didn't have to pretend to be something he wasn't. This is going to get worse before it gets better, he said. Castellano won't go down easy. And even after he's gone, there will be others who see tonight as an opportunity to challenge me, to test whether eliminating one enemy made me vulnerable to the next. Then we deal with that when it comes. We? You said I'm under your protection. That makes this my war too. Ava's voice was steady. So when you go to that warehouse district tonight, I'll be here making sure Ellie stays safe. And when you come home, I'll help you figure out how to survive whatever comes next. Because apparently that's who I am now. A woman who helps monsters stay alive so they can keep protecting the people who matter. Moretti studied her for a long moment. Then he closed the distance between them and pulled her into a kiss that tasted like desperation and violence, and something that might have been hope wearing a different mask. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers. If something happens to me tonight, nothing's going to happen. If something happens, he continued, Marco has instructions. Money, protection, new identities. Everything you need to take Ellie and disappear. Promise me you'll use it. I promise. Ava's hands fisted in his shirt. But you need to promise me something too. Come home. Whatever it takes. Come home. I'll do my best. That's not good enough. His smile was small and sad. It's the only honest answer I can give. The hours until 2 a.m. passed in agonizing slowness. Moretti prepared with Vincent and Marco, the three of them reviewing plans and contingencies and backup strategies. Armed men moved through the penthouse with military precision. Weapons were checked. Vehicles were staged. Every detail was accounted for with the thoroughness of people who understood that missed details meant body bags. Ava stayed with Ellie, reading picture books and singing lullabies while her daughter slept peacefully, completely unaware that the man who'd given her a room full of dinosaurs was preparing to commit murder to keep her safe. At 1:30 a.m., Moretti appeared in Ellie's doorway, dressed entirely in black, his expression set in lines that suggested he'd already made peace with whatever he was about to do. We're moving out, he said quietly. Ava carefully extracted herself from Ellie's bed and met him in the hallway. Up close, she could see the tension in his shoulders and the particular coldness in his eyes that came from shutting down everything except tactical focus. How many men? She asked. 20, split across 3 teams. Vincent leads the assault on the main warehouse. Marco handles the eastern approach. I take the western entry with the heavy weapons team. And if it's a trap? Then I die knowing I did everything possible to protect you and Ellie. That's the best any of us can hope for. He touched her face gently. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone except Rose or Marco. If you hear anything unusual, take Ellie to the safe room behind the master closet and lock yourself in until I return. There's a safe room? There's always a safe room. His smile was grim. I don't build homes. I build fortresses. The safe room has supplies for 3 days, communications equipment, and an emergency exit that leads to the parking garage. If I don't come back by dawn, use it. Ava's chest tightened. You're going to come back. Probably, but I don't make promises I can't guarantee. He kissed her forehead, his lips lingering for just a moment longer than necessary. Take care of her. Take care of yourself. He turned and walked toward the elevator where his men were waiting, and Ava watched him disappear into the machinery of violence he'd built his entire life around. The elevator doors closed, and Ava was alone with sleeping Ellie and too many thoughts, and the particular kind of fear that came from finally admitting you cared about someone whose survival was anything but guaranteed. She moved to the windows overlooking Seattle and watched the city glitter beneath rain-heavy clouds, wondering how many of those lights would still be burning by dawn and how much blood would be spilled in the darkness between now and sunrise. Her phone buzzed one final time. Unknown. Last chance. Take Ellie and run. What's about to happen will destroy everything, and when the dust settles, you'll realize you chose the wrong side. Diana. Still pushing, still trying to fracture whatever fragile thing was forming between Ava and the violent man who'd claimed them both as his to protect. Ava blocked the number and set her phone down. She'd made her choice. Right or wrong, she was standing with the monster who'd given her daughter safety. And if that made her complicit in whatever horrors were about to unfold in the Harbor District, then she'd find a way to live with that guilt. Because mothers didn't have the luxury of choosing moral high ground over survival. They chose whatever kept their children breathing. And tonight, that meant Lucien Moretti painting Seattle red with the blood of anyone who threatened what was his. Ava stood at the window watching the rain and waiting for dawn, praying to nothing in particular that the man who'd kissed her forehead and promised to try his best would survive the war he was fighting in her name. Because somewhere between the diner floor and this bulletproof window, between poverty and protection, between fear and something dangerously close to trust, she'd started needing him to come home. And that terrified her more than anything else ever could. Dawn broke over Seattle like a wound-bleeding light across the horizon. Ava stood at the windows watching the city emerge from darkness, while her coffee went cold in her hands and exhaustion pulled at her bones. She hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Not while Moretti was somewhere in the Harbor District doing things she could imagine too clearly and didn't want to name. The penthouse behind her was silent except for the sound of armed guards rotating shifts, and Rose humming softly in Ellie's room where her daughter still slept, protected by ignorance and dinosaurs and the particular mercy of childhood that allowed you to dream peacefully while adults fought wars in your name. Ava's phone had stayed silent since she'd blocked Diana's number. No updates, no messages. Just the waiting that stretched nerves tighter than piano wire and made every sound feel like a threat manifesting. Then the elevator chimed. Ava spun around so fast coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup, her heart hammering against her ribs hard enough to hurt. The doors slid open and Moretti stepped out, and Ava's breath caught because he looked like he'd walked through the gates of hell and barely made it back. His black clothes were torn in places. Blood stained his hands and spattered across his shirt in patterns that told stories Ava didn't want to read. A cut above his left eye leaked crimson down his temple. He moved with the careful precision of someone cataloging injuries they hadn't had time to properly assess yet. But he was alive. He was home. Behind him, Marco and Vincent emerged looking equally battered, but functional. The other men filed out in silence, their expressions carrying the weight of what they'd witnessed and participated in. Moretti's eyes found Ava across the room, and something in his expression softened before hardening again into the mask he wore when he couldn't afford to show weakness. "It's done," he said quietly. Those two words carried the weight of bodies and consequences and choices that couldn't be unmade. Ava set down her coffee and crossed the space between them, her hands reaching for his face before she could think better of it. She touched the cut above his eye gently, and Moretti flinched but didn't pull away. "How bad?" she asked. "Nothing that won't heal." His voice was rough, scraped raw by hours of giving orders and breathing smoke and doing things that required shutting down everything except the capacity for violence. Castellano's dead, his operations dismantled, the leak's been eliminated. We're safe. Define safe. No one's coming for you or Ellie. Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until someone else is stupid enough to challenge me, and after tonight that won't happen for a while. He caught her wrist gently when she tried to examine another cut near his jaw. "I need to clean up. Ellie shouldn't see me like this. She's still asleep." "Good." He glanced at Marco. "Get everyone checked by Dr. Chen. Anyone seriously injured goes to the private clinic. No hospitals, no records, and I want a full debrief in 6 hours. Everyone present, no exceptions." Marco nodded and herded the other men toward a different elevator. A service entrance Ava hadn't known existed, designed for exactly these situations where blood and weapons needed to move through the building without attracting civilian attention. When they were gone, Moretti finally allowed himself to sag slightly against the wall, exhaustion breaking through the control he'd maintained in front of his men. "Come on," Ava said, taking his hand. "Let's get you cleaned up." She led him to the master bathroom, a space of marble and chrome that felt absurdly luxurious for cleaning blood from skin. Moretti sat on the edge of the massive bathtub while Ava wet a washcloth and began carefully wiping away the evidence of what he'd done. Up close, the damage was more extensive than she'd realized. Bruises darkening along his ribs, cuts across his knuckles that suggested his hands had met faces and concrete and things less forgiving than flesh. The particular exhaustion that came from hours of sustained violence. "Tell me," Ava said quietly as she worked. "What happened?" Moretti was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat and distant, like he was reading a report rather than recounting lived experience. "We hit the main warehouse at 2:15 a.m. Castellano had 23 men inside. Former military, most of them. Well-trained, well-armed. They knew we were coming. Someone tipped them off, probably Carlo, before we took him. So it wasn't the surprise assault we'd planned. It was a firefight." He paused while Ava cleaned the cut above his eye, his jaw tightening when the washcloth found nerve endings. "Vincent's team breached the eastern wall while Marco's hit the loading docks. I took the western approach with the heavy weapons. Took us 40 minutes to clear the building. Casualties on both sides. 2 of my men dead. 5 wounded badly enough they're at the clinic now. All 23 of Castellano's soldiers eliminated." "And Castellano himself?" "I found him in his office on the 3rd floor, surrounded by files he was trying to destroy. Evidence of his operations, his payoffs, everyone he had compromised." Moretti's expression went cold. "He tried to negotiate, offered me everything he had, money, territory, information on other organizations, begged for his life like all of it could be fixed with the right deal. What did you do? I reminded him what happens when you threaten children under my protection. Then I shot him twice in the chest and once in the head to make sure he understood the lesson, even in death. The words landed between them like stones dropping into still water, sending ripples Ava could feel in her bones. She should have been horrified, should have recoiled from the casual way Moretti described execution-style murder. Instead, she just kept cleaning blood from his skin and thinking about Ellie sleeping peacefully down the hall because this violent man had burned down an entire criminal operation to keep her safe. I'm not going to apologize, Moretti said quietly, for what I did or what I'm capable of. You needed to see it eventually, the real me, the one who doesn't flinch at violence when violence is the only solution. I'm not asking you to apologize. Ava moved to his hands, carefully cleaning the cuts across his knuckles. I'm just trying to figure out how to reconcile the man who kills people in warehouses with the man who picked out dinosaurs for my daughter. They're the same man. That's what you need to understand. His eyes met hers. I'm capable of extraordinary violence in service of the things I choose to protect. And I chose you and Ellie. That choice makes me more dangerous, not less. Because now I have something to lose, and men with something to lose don't fight fair. They fight to win. Always. Ava finished cleaning his hands and set the washcloth aside. What about Carlo? Moretti's expression went carefully blank. Carlo was handled by Marco. I didn't ask for details, and Marco didn't offer them. He's not coming back. That's all that matters. And the leak? Are there others? We audited everyone, financial records, communications, movements. Carlo was the only one. He's the one who sold your playground photos to Castellano, who told him where you'd be and when, who made you and Ellie targets. Then I'm glad he's dead. The words came out harder than Ava intended, but she meant them. Does that make me a monster too? No, it makes you a mother who understands that some threats can't be negotiated with. They can only be eliminated. Moretti stood slowly, testing injuries. You should rest. You've been awake all night. So have you. I'm used to it. You're not. I'm used to a lot of things I never thought I'd be used to. Ava moved toward the bathroom door, then stopped. Lucien? What Diana told me about the pregnancy, about you forcing her to terminate it. His entire body went rigid. What about it? Was she telling the truth? Any of it? Moretti was quiet for so long Ava thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Diana got pregnant. That part's true. And yes, I gave her money and the number for a clinic. But I didn't force anything. I told her the truth. That I wasn't capable of being a father. That bringing a child into my world was cruel. That I'd never pretend to want something I knew would destroy me. He turned to face her. She made it sound like I threatened her career unless she terminated. The reality is I told her if she kept the pregnancy, I couldn't be part of it. That I'd pay child support and ensure the child was provided for. But I wouldn't play father when I knew I'd fail at it. She interpreted that as a threat because she wanted me to choose her and the baby over everything else. When I didn't, she tried to weaponize the pregnancy into leverage. That's when I had to make things clear about consequences. What happened to the pregnancy? She miscarried at 12 weeks. Stress, the doctor said. Or maybe just bad luck. I'll never know if my refusal to commit caused it or if it would have happened anyway. His expression was haunted. But I live with the knowledge that my choices might have cost that pregnancy. That's my burden, not hers. Ava studied his face and saw genuine regret written in lines that couldn't be faked. Do you wish you'd made a different choice? No, because I wasn't capable of being what Diana needed me to be. I would have been a terrible father, distant, controlling, unable to show the kind of unconditional love children deserve. Better no father than a bad one. And now? With Ellie? Ellie's not mine. She's yours. I'm just the man making sure she grows up safe. But something flickered across his face when he said it. Something that suggested the distinction mattered less than he wanted to admit. I should shower. You should check on her. Ava left him in the bathroom and went to Ellie's room, where her daughter was just waking up, rubbing her eyes and clutching Mr. Trunk like she'd never let go. Mama, is it morning? Yeah, baby, it's morning. Can we have pancakes? We can have whatever you want. Rose appeared in the doorway looking exhausted but functional. I'll make breakfast. You look like you need coffee more than you need to flip pancakes. Ava was about to argue, but Rose was already guiding Ellie toward the kitchen, chattering about dinosaurs and syrup and whether T-Rexes would have liked blueberries. Left alone, Ava sank onto Ellie's race car bed and felt the weight of the past 24 hours crash over her like a wave. She'd met with Diana and learned things about Moretti that should have terrified her. She'd discovered Carlo's betrayal and watched him get dragged away to die. She'd kissed Moretti and promised to help him survive whatever came next. She'd waited through the night while he committed murder in her name. And now she was sitting in a child's bedroom in a penthouse fortress, wondering what kind of woman she'd become. Her phone buzzed. An unknown number, but not Diana this time. Unknown. This is Senator Hartwell's office. The senator requests a meeting at your earliest convenience. She has information about Lucien Moretti's activities last night that you need to hear. Please respond within 24 hours. Ava stared at the message and felt something cold settle in her chest. Diana wasn't done. Wouldn't be done until she'd destroyed whatever fragile thing was building between Ava and Moretti. But this time, Ava knew exactly what to do. She forwarded the message to Moretti and typed a single sentence. She's not stopping. The response came within seconds. Neither am I. 3 days passed before the city began reacting to what had happened in the Harbor District. The official story, fed to media by police departments and city officials who understood certain truths were better left unspoken, was that a fire had broken out in an abandoned warehouse. Tragic accident, faulty wiring, 23 casualties, most of them transient individuals who'd been squatting in the building, no signs of foul play. Case closed. The unofficial story, the one whispered in the underground and corporate boardrooms and political backrooms, was that Lucien Moretti had eliminated an entire rival organization in a single night, that he'd painted the Harbor District red and walked away without a single arrest or investigation, that he'd proven once again why challenging him was a fatal mistake. Ava watched the news coverage with Moretti beside her on the couch, his arm around her shoulders in a gesture that had become comfortable with surprising speed. Ellie played on the floor nearby, building block towers and knocking them down while making explosion sounds that were both adorable and disturbingly appropriate. They're not going to investigate, Ava said quietly. No. Too many people on Castellano's payroll who don't want their connections exposed. The fire story lets everyone save face and move on. Moretti's voice was neutral. Welcome to how power actually works in this city. Truth is negotiable when enough people benefit from the lie. And Diana? What about her meeting request? Ignore it. She's grasping at straws, trying to find leverage that doesn't exist anymore. He glanced at Ava. Unless you want to meet with her, hear whatever story she's selling this week. No, I'm done with Diana's version of the truth. She wants me to believe you're the monster, but I've seen what actual monsters do. You're not one of them. I've killed more people than Diana wants you to know about, to protect what's yours. That's different than killing for profit, or pleasure, or power. Ava leaned into him slightly. You're brutal and violent and you've done terrible things. But you're also the man who carried me out of a diner when you could have just paid my hospital bill and walked away. Who gave Ellie a room full of toys you picked out yourself? Who eliminated an entire criminal organization because someone took photos of my daughter at a playground? Most people would call that excessive. Most people haven't spent years drowning in poverty while the system pretended to care but never actually helped. I know what real monsters look like, Lucien. They're the ones who smile while they let you starve. You're just honest about being dangerous. Moretti pulled her closer, and they sat in comfortable silence while Ellie demolished another block tower and the television droned on about the tragic warehouse fire that had claimed so many lives. 2 weeks later, Ava stood in the bathroom staring at a positive pregnancy test and trying to remember how to breathe. This couldn't be happening. They'd been careful. She was on birth control. The odds were, but odds didn't matter when you were staring at 2 pink lines that rewrote your entire future. She heard Moretti moving around in the bedroom and felt panic claw at her throat because this was exactly what had destroyed his relationship with Diana. This was the complication he'd explicitly said he couldn't handle. This was the thing that would make him see her as a trap rather than a choice. Ava emerged from the bathroom to find Moretti buttoning his shirt, preparing for another day of managing his empire. He saw her expression and immediately went still. What's wrong? I need to tell you something. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. And I need you to understand that I'm not asking for anything. I'm not trying to trap you or force decisions. I'm just telling you because you deserve to know. Ava, you're scaring me. She held up the test. I'm pregnant. The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Moretti's expression went completely blank, the mask sliding into place so fast Ava couldn't read what he was thinking or feeling. How long have you known? 30 seconds? I just took the test. And what do you want to do? The question was delivered without inflection, perfectly neutral, giving nothing away. Ava recognized it as the same approach he'd probably used with Diana, offering options without revealing his own preference. I'm keeping it. She said it firmly, no hesitation. I'm 31 years old. I want another child. And I'm not asking you to be involved. I know your history. I know what happened with Diana. I'm not her. I'm not trying to leverage this into commitment or marriage or anything you don't want to give. You're not asking for anything. I'm asking that you not punish me for biology, that you let me and Ellie stay here until the baby's born and I can figure out next steps. After that, we'll go. New city, new life. You can pay child support if you want or not. I don't care. I just need time to plan before I... Stop. Moretti crossed the room and took her face in his hands. Stop planning your exit and listen to me. Ava's pulse hammered against her ribs. Diana's pregnancy terrified me because I didn't care about her the way she cared about me. Because bringing a child into that dynamic felt like building a prison neither of us deserved. But you... His voice cracked slightly. You're not Diana. You're not a strategic alliance or a business arrangement anymore. You're the person I think about when I'm making decisions, the one I come home to. The reason I'm trying to be something better than just the monster everyone thinks I am. Lucien, I don't know if I'll be good at this. I don't know if I can be the kind of father children deserve. But I want to try. His eyes were intense. If you'll let me, if you're willing to risk that I might fail spectacularly at this. Ava felt tears she didn't know she was holding break free. You're saying you want this baby. I'm saying I want you. And Ellie. And this child. I want all of it. He pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering beneath her ear. I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. But watching you with Ellie taught me that being a parent isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, protecting them, giving them a chance to grow up safe and loved. And those things I can do. Ava clung to him and cried while he held her, and somewhere in the background, Ellie called out asking if they were going to have lunch soon because she was hungry and dinosaurs needed food too. 6 months later, Ava stood in front of a bathroom mirror, examining her reflection and barely recognizing the woman staring back. Her body had changed, swollen with pregnancy, glowing in the way people claimed pregnant women glowed, but that mostly just felt like being tired and nauseous all the time. But it was her eyes that looked different. Harder, maybe. More knowing. The eyes of someone who'd seen violence and chosen to live with it rather than run from it. Behind her, Moretti appeared in the doorway, and Ava saw him reflected in the mirror, shirt untucked, hair disheveled from sleep, looking more human than the cold kingpin who'd carried her out of a diner 8 months ago. You're up early, he said, moving to stand behind her, his hand settling on her swollen belly with the careful gentleness he reserved for Ellie and this unborn child. Couldn't sleep, too much kicking. He's going to be a fighter. We don't know it's a he. I have a feeling. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Vincent called last night. The audit's complete. No more leaks, no more threats. We're stable. Until the next person decides to challenge you. Until then, yes. But the message we sent with Castellano bought us time, maybe years. Ava leaned back against him, feeling his strength support her weight. Do you ever regret it? Bringing me into your world. Making your life more complicated. Every day. His voice was soft. But I regret the years before you more. The ones where I forgot what it felt like to care about something beyond power. That's not an answer. That's the only answer I have. He turned her to face him. Ava, I don't know if what we're building is sustainable. I don't know if exposing you and Ellie and this baby to my world makes me protective or selfish. But I know I'm better with you than without you. And right now, that's enough. They stood in the bathroom holding each other while dawn broke over Seattle and Ellie started calling for breakfast, and the machinery of Moretti's empire continued running in the background, protection and violence working in concert to maintain the fragile peace they'd carved from chaos. Ava's phone buzzed. Diana Hartwell. Congratulations on the pregnancy. I hope he treats you better than he treated me. But don't say I didn't warn you about what happens when the monster gets bored. Ava deleted the message without responding and blocked the number permanently. Diana could sell her version of history to whoever would listen. It didn't matter anymore. Because Ava had learned something important in the past 8 months. There were no heroes in this world. No villains either. Just people making choices based on incomplete information and hoping those choices didn't destroy them. Moretti was brutal and violent and had killed people to protect what he considered his. He was also the man who held her through nightmares and read picture books to Ellie and attended every prenatal appointment, asking questions about fetal development, like he was preparing for an exam. Both were true. Both were real. And Ava had chosen to build a life with both versions of him because the alternative was going back to a world where she and Ellie drowned slowly in poverty, while people pretended systemic violence was somehow more acceptable than the personal kind. 3 months later, Ava went into labor at 2 a.m. during a rainstorm that hammered Seattle like the night they'd met. Moretti drove her to the private clinic with hands that shook slightly on the steering wheel, and Ava realized with something like wonder that he was terrified. Not of enemies, or violence, or death, but of this, the completely natural process of bringing a child into the world that he couldn't control or fix with money or threats. "It's going to be okay," she said between contractions. "You don't know that. Neither do you. So we're going to trust Dr. Chen and the nurses and the fact that women have been doing this for thousands of years. Not my women. Not my child." The possessiveness in his voice should have bothered her. Instead, it just made her love him more fiercely than she thought possible. This violent man reduced to terror by the prospect of something going wrong that he couldn't shoot his way out of. Labor lasted 14 hours. Brutal, exhausting, the kind of pain that redefined Ava's understanding of what her body could endure. Moretti stayed beside her the entire time, holding her hand and letting her squeeze until his fingers went white and offering updates from Dr. Chen that she mostly couldn't process through the pain. Then finally, mercifully, a cry split the air. "It's a boy," Dr. Chen announced, holding up a small, squirming bundle covered in vernix and blood, and the particular mess that came with new life. Ava collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted and triumphant and completely overwhelmed. Moretti stood frozen beside the bed, staring at the baby with an expression Ava had never seen before. Wonder mixed with terror, mixed with something that looked suspiciously like love. "Do you want to hold him?" Dr. Chen asked. Moretti looked at Ava for permission, and she nodded through exhausted tears. He took the baby with hands that had broken bones and pulled triggers and carried her out of a diner, and those same hands cradled new life with heartbreaking gentleness. The baby quieted immediately, like he recognized something in Moretti's voice when he whispered words Ava couldn't hear. "He's perfect," Moretti said finally, his voice rough. "He's absolutely perfect." Ava reached up and took his hand, pulling him closer so they formed a circle around this tiny human they'd created together. The single mother from a diner and the crime lord who'd given her safety. "What should we name him?" she asked. Moretti was quiet for a long moment, studying the baby's face like he was memorizing every detail. "What about James, after your father? After your—" Ava's chest tightened because Moretti remembered the photo album she'd brought from her old apartment with pictures of parents who'd died too young. Remembered the stories she'd told about a father who'd worked construction and taught her to fix car engines and never lived to see his granddaughter born. "James," she repeated. "James Moretti." "Moretti? If you're asking us to stay, we might as well share a name, easier than explaining why the baby has a different last name than his father." Moretti's expression shifted. "You'd do that? Take my name?" "I'd do a lot of things I never thought I'd do, including fall in love with a man who terrifies entire city blocks." She met his eyes. "So yes, if you're asking, I'm saying yes." He kissed her then, carefully, mindfully of the baby cradled between them, and Ava tasted salt from tears she wasn't sure belonged to her, or him, or both of them together. 2 years later, Ava stood in the penthouse watching Ellie play with her little brother while Moretti worked at his desk in the office, and Seattle glittered beyond bulletproof windows like a kingdom that had finally achieved fragile peace. She'd gone back to school, started studying to become a nurse practitioner, using the education money Moretti provided without expectation of repayment. She spent her days in classes and clinical rotations, learning to heal people with the same intensity she'd once used to serve them coffee. Ellie was in kindergarten now, thriving in a private school that cost more than Ava used to make in a year. She came home each day with stories about friends and teachers and finger paintings of dinosaurs that Moretti framed and hung in his office like they were priceless art. James was walking now, toddling after his sister with the determined focus of someone who refused to be left behind. He had Moretti's dark eyes and Ava's smile and a laugh that could brighten even the darkest days. And Moretti himself had changed in ways Ava never expected. He still ran his empire with brutal efficiency, still made decisions that required violence and blood, still terrified people who crossed him. But he also coached Ellie's soccer team on weekends, read bedtime stories to James every night, held Ava when she came home exhausted from clinical rotations, and reminded her that she was building something important. The monster and the man existed in the same body, and Ava had learned to love both equally. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. She glanced at it and felt her blood run cold. Breaking. Senator Diana Hartwell arrested on corruption charges. Federal investigation reveals years of accepting bribes, misappropriating campaign funds, and obstruction of justice. Trial pending. Ava looked toward Moretti's office and found him watching her with an expression that confirmed her suspicion. "You did this," she said. "I did what needed to be done to protect us." Diana wouldn't let go. Kept trying to turn city officials against me. Kept spreading stories designed to destabilize my operations. So I gave the FBI evidence of actual crimes she'd committed and let justice run its course. He moved to stand beside her. She made her choices. Now she lives with the consequences. That's not justice, that's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. He pulled her against his chest. "I told you I'd burn Seattle to protect what's mine. Diana just found out I meant it." Ava should have been horrified, should have questioned whether she could live with a man who weaponized federal agencies against his enemies. Instead, she just held him tighter and thought about all the nights Diana had tried to poison her against Moretti. All the warnings and manipulations designed to fracture what they were building. "Is it over?" she asked quietly. "With Diana?" "It's over. She'll be too busy fighting criminal charges to worry about us. And by the time she gets out, if she gets out, we'll be old news. Someone else's problem." They stood together watching their children play while the city beyond the windows continued its eternal dance of light and shadow, and Ava realized with something like peace that this was her life now. Not perfect, not safe, but real in ways that mattered more than the pretty lies she used to tell herself about how the world worked. She'd fallen in love with a monster who'd learned to be human for her. She'd chosen protection over poverty and violence over vulnerability. She'd become a mother who understood that sometimes keeping your children safe meant making choices that would haunt you forever. And she'd built a family from broken people who'd found each other in a diner during a rainstorm and decided that survival was worth the cost of blood and fear and loving someone the world said you should run from. Moretti's phone rang. He glanced at it, kissed Ava's forehead, and moved back toward his office to handle whatever crisis had emerged in his empire this time. Ava watched him go, then turned her attention back to Ellie and James, who were building a fortress out of pillows and declaring war on invisible dragons. "Mama," Ellie called out, "come help us! The dragons are winning!" Ava crossed the room and knelt beside her children, helping them build walls higher and stronger, teaching them without words that sometimes the best defense against monsters was learning to live with one who'd promised to keep you safe. Outside the windows, Seattle glittered beneath a sky that threatened rain. And somewhere in that city, other people were making choices that would echo through their lives in ways they couldn't predict. But here, in this fortress made of bulletproof glass and dinosaurs and love built from desperation, Ava had everything that mattered: safety, family, a future that wasn't defined by how much she could endure, but by what she chose to protect. She'd walked into a diner as a woman drowning in poverty, and walked out in the arms of a man who'd taught her that survival sometimes meant embracing the darkness instead of running from it. And in the end, that made all the difference. Because the world wasn't divided into good people and bad people. It was divided into people who protected what they loved and people who took advantage of that love. Ava had chosen to protect hers. whatever the cost, whatever she had to become. And that choice, brutal and honest and real, was worth every drop of blood spilled in its name.